This conference will now be recorded.
Order. Lisa, could you please call the roll of the commissioners?
Vice Chair Mike Espiritu,
Here.
Sean Powell,
Here.
Matt McDonald.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioners, entertain a motion for approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Thank you. Agenda is approved. Minutes from the Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 meeting. Commissioners.
A motion to approve it. Second.
Now, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes are approved in the May meeting. Number 5, no next items. Director Stark, please.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Not a whole lot to report this month. Upcoming events, Bombardier will be here next week or week after to do some testing with a Global 6000. They'll be here about a week or so to do their testing. Talked to Boeing yesterday. They'll be here if it all works out. I mean, they're doing advanced planning at this point, probably for about a month in October. Other things going on. We're in our grant season, so been having meetings with FAA over the current grant, which are our master plan update grant and our preliminary engineering report for the runway 1735 project, which will happen in 24. Those all look good. We should be seeing, well, actually today, we got the grant offer for the master plan, so we should be seeing the PER pretty quickly. Our parking revenue continues to creep down as United is pulling off their airplanes, but it's still running around 100,000 a month, so it's doing pretty well. Our fuel flow fees continue to stay pretty high due to all the fire activity up north, and in the other places we've got a lot of activity from 10 Tanker and the other aircraft that are coming and fighting that fire. Other than that, last week I was in Seattle for the AAAE conference. That went pretty well. A lot of pertinent information and training from the airline and aviation airports industry. It was really good. That's pretty much it, I believe, for now.
You take us number 6, please, Scott.
Number 6, set hanger update. The good news there is all of that went through the council and got approved. And basically, I'll let Mike talk about their side of it, but we've gone to our choice C, I suppose it was, to get the thing going. It is going. They're setting up their construction site now. So it's on a roll. And I don't know if you want to mention anything on that.
Before I say anything, I do want to recognize, I apologize, our mayor, Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here. Of course, our former representative on the city council, Judy Stokes. And the many guests, thank you for being here and making time today to be here. The company, Ascent, requested that they take care of the project. And they want to get to that engineer's estimate that Armstrong has provided at 14.6, and what the city's engaged the EDC to do is a project service agreement where we become the fiscal agent, and we have an agreement, and we'll be leasing the land from the city for a year so we can manage the project. And the EDC will have an agreement with Ascent. Ascent will take care of all the construction and work with Armstrong and whoever their contractors are to get the project done. So we are, the EDC is pretty much a pass-through, but we all have ownership. We all can cancel the deal at any time if we desire, if things are not right. But we anticipate things to move on well. The big key is the company asked to do that because the costs and the bids The first bid was 20.8 million. The second round of bids was at 18.7 and 19,
3 and 6.
something like that. And that would have pretty much killed the project. So the company said, we'll take care of it for 14.6 million. And if it exceeds that, we'll take care of it. So no risk to the city, but surely up to the company to perform whatever they do to get to that point within the confines of whatever laws and statutes and engineering requirements are needed. Any questions on the Ascent project? Scott, the number 7, please.
Southeast water line, click to the next slide. That's really, oh, can we get rid of the stuff on the right with the go-to? Can we minimize that? Just didn't realize it was blocking part of the slides. Yeah, there you go. I have to start over again. So short answer on that, update on that is that we're still really somewhat in a holding pattern due to the supply chain issues. As you all know, White Cloud Pipeline Company got that bid. And I talked to Scott Patterson about that yesterday, see where they were. Parts are beginning to arrive. As they arrive, they're going to start storing them on site. So they have access to the air center to start putting them on the job site. But there's no pipe available now. That's the main thing that we're waiting on, is getting the pipe in. So we're still anticipating a construction start date of August. That hasn't changed yet.
Is that 14-inch water line?
Mm-hmm.
Are we also putting other infrastructure in that trenching as well, or just water?
Just water. I don't think, I mean, that's a better question for Lorenzo, but I think last time we talked about that, we weren't allowed to put certain things in with the water and sewer have to go.
That's correct.
Different.
Is
Is that correct?
For the clean water, drinking water, we have to have spacing.
Yeah.
Fuel line or something in there.
It would add an extra flavor.
Okay.
And that's pretty much the update on that.
What's the expected length of the project once they have the materials?
I think they were looking at 45 days or to 60.
That wasn't very long.
It's easy digging through there. We'll put Lewis on the route. So all that should be.
Okay. Anything else?
They're just doing the blue part first right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Blue and green.
Yeah,
So-
blue and the green. Yeah. Get the water from the tank and then share it out.
Yeah, if you look on that, it's kind of hard to see up there because it's small, but it's basically phase 1 is the blue, and I think it was 4 is what we had numbered the green
Yes.
originally. Then that's from the water tower over to getting into the air center. That's, once it's done, there'll be water all the way over to AVEX and then going east where it'll attach to the lines going into Wyo Acres.
That's county property on the other side of Wyo?
Yes, yes.
And Lewis adjusted the water pressures in case their county did want to take something out of there too. So there were some pressure adjustments, I think, but that was Lewis's world. So we told them whatever you need us to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Any other comments? Questions? Commissioners?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
One, since all that line's going over there, basically, is basically going over there because of the water pollution, I assume that's right. Has anybody ever filed a complaint against the military or whoever about the pollution that caused that?
We are actually and have been ever since all of that came out. We've been working with the Corps over the years to get stuff done. And they kind of have stalled it, and Josh can probably speak a little more to it than I can. But yes, we're working with the Domenici law firm to resolve all of those issues with the TCE. That's the short of it, if you want to add anything.
There's a agreement between the Corps of Engineers and the city.
Yeah.
Totally agreement. That neither party is forced to act for purposes of statute of limitations until additional information is found. Exactly where we're at. So we're not rat shots. Once you go further, you have a lawsuit, you have to go into the courts, speak.
Well, I mean, I don't know, but I think that line, basic reason for that line is is because of the pollution, and I think the city ought to be reimbursed for it, shouldn't use other money for that. Yeah, that's just it. The other comment I would say is over on the, somewhere in there should be a T over there by, so we can, I don't know about the line that goes there now. I think they have an 8-inch line that goes to feed the BLM site for fueling those airplanes, or not fueling them, but for the
Water.
fire retardant. Because if we can get that from that circle right there where they turn, if we can get that 600 feet of line, you know, they should be filling 2 or 3 planes. And, you know, from the cost was $5 million for us to put in that little taxiway there. But, you know, I don't know, just put like $50 million in Albuquerque so they could fill the same planes we already have. So to me, it kind of doesn't make sense. Somebody in the government can't find us $5 million to fix that, because then they wouldn't need the Albuquerque deal. What you're talking about to me is, you know, $150 or 150 air miles. Those planes can go about 600 or 700 miles away from the base, I guess, from where they are after they fuel. So that takes them all the way across New Mexico into most Colorado, Arizona. So, I mean, it's a big base here. So they don't, for $50 million, they don't gain much in Albuquerque over us. And you could fill 2 or 3 planes up there at one time. It wouldn't be much to, because the BLM wants to put in a storage place for their chemicals, and but you can put another fueling station in very easily in a tank, very easily, and fill 2 of these planes at a time, and just have them run like a clock, not having to pass an any of.
Wouldn't it be better to find a better location for that facility than where it's at?
Well, that's, if you can find a better location, do it.
So on the airport is what I'm saying.
That's what I agree. If you can find a better location, do it. But, you know, we got a water line there now. That's my only thing. It's whether or not we're charging air sale for their storage or use of the tarmac outside. Historically, I don't think we ever charged much for the tarmac. So it's. You know,
Yeah, I know having that blocked off for those firefighting aircraft is a hindrance to normal MRO operations.
Well, I don't want to digress too far off onto another subject, but we are working on a solution for that. That's what the mayor was talking about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's me. I think it's crazy not to be able to find $5 million somewhere to fix it. So, hey, has anybody else written anything to the Heinrich or any of the Congress people or anything?
Not that I'm aware
Or their
of,
BLM?
just the phone calls I've made.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you suggesting that maybe we offer a recommendation that council and the staff consider keying off that existing, because that's going to be a change to the,
Job changing a lot of model.
yeah, that'll change.
Yeah, you know, and I just don't know how the other water line is comes into that thing. So if you put a T in now, it doesn't cost much. You put it in later afterwards, it costs you a lot of money.
Sure.
And
Yeah, you could put it in there for sure. I mean,
so I mean,
just
I
leave
just
it
think
blank.
the T in there. So
And the other discussion I would want to have is see what the needs are for BLM, because if my understanding of the way the water comes in, it runs right down the east side of the ramp, and they fill their water tank out of that 8-inch line, and the age of it may be an issue, but I'm not sure if the capacity is an issue, because they're going into a tank first, and then they're going into a mixing tank with the slurry. So I don't know if that's too little of a line or not. It's a pretty big line, but I would want to see what their needs are before we made any big decisions like that.
yeah, I mean,
But a T is easy, you're right.
no, yeah, if future makes sense to put one in.
my water tanks at the ranch hold about 38,000 gallons. And so that means that I can fill 4 planes. So it's not that much. You don't need you don't need an 8-inch line to fill those tanks. And,
Right.
but as long as you're going by there with a 14, you can come off of it whatever you want.
Yep.
But, you know, I mean, you wouldn't need a 14-inch line, I don't think.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Make a recommendation, motion to make a recommendation to city council through their process to consider adding a T to that line, which will change obviously the engineering and the water modeling a little bit, so it'll be some.
Can't be a change order to the,
Be a change order, so it'll be some.
but if the hole's open and you throw the T in there, cover it up, and then you can always go back and get it later.
You need, to- if we're going to do Robert's rules, this is a non-action item.
It is. But the mayor does bring a good point, and
He does.
it's never been on an action item list, so I think we probably should consider something if we want, if you choose to.
I was gonna say, either way, even without a formal action on this, we can push the recommendation of the proper staff.
All right, we'll take care of that then.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. Number 8, Dennis Forsythe. Dennis?
Good afternoon. Can we switch over the presentation? It's great to be here with you all today. Yeah, perfect. The purpose of our presentation today is really for the pleasure of the new advisory commission members and the new administration to really give an update on the ongoing project. Since we have a lot of new faces here as well, we're going to touch a little bit of an overview and some background on some of the history and some of the other projects. So we have a lot of slides to cover, and then we'll roll into the airport master plan, which is part of the presentation. What we wanted to do first is make sure everyone is familiar with the Armstrong team and the folks that are here. Myself, obviously, we work for the city. Our contract is with the city of Roswell. And within that is the airport director, a city manager, the commission from an advisory nature, and then Armstrong Consultants. Me, David Hartman is here. He's our vice president, director of our engineering services, Mike Garcia, obviously engineer out of our Albuquerque office. He runs the whole Albuquerque team of designers. We also, our lines of business include planning, engineering, and construction period services. So that is our main line of business. So we have teams on each side. We call it field inspection. It's really field observation. During construction, we observe and record all the activities that go on to make sure the contractor is building the project in accordance with the plans and specs that our engineers designed and that our planners planned as part of the overall 20-year master plan. So it really flows together in an efficient process. As you can see, we have a lot of bench strength and resources under each department serving the planning, engineering, and construction. So that's primarily the Armstrong team. And then you have some other important agencies, primarily from a regulatory and funding aspect. You have the FAA, the Airports District Office out of Fort Worth, which is part of the Southwest region of the FAA. So you have the regional manager, the Airports District Office. This FAA, the Airports District Office, is different than a lot of other offices that the FAA that you might be familiar with. There's also a Flight Standards District Office. They work more with the pilot side and the aircraft certification side and that side of the house than airports. There's also flight procedures, where they're the ones that draft the instrument approach procedures in and out of the airports. There's also FAA facilities, and they maintain the navigational aids on airports, like the instrument landing system, some of the visual aids, and then there's our traffic control. So we specifically, well, we work with all the different branches, primarily the Airports District Office. And you have the manager, assistant manager, you have a program manager. Gene, he's the one who works on your programming for your funding, your 5-year CIP, your grants, those kinds of things, your planner, environmental specialist. Those three on the bottom are the day-to-day people that we work with, and you also work with from the FAA side to tee up your projects, plan them out on your 5-year capital improvement program, get them programmed, get them funded, and help execute them. They also provide typically 90% of the funding for projects on airports. 93. So 93 in New Mexico, it varies. But Yeah, so for eligible infrastructure, 93 cents on the dollar. And then the new NMDOT and the aviation division also supports from a planning and programming standpoint, but they also provide half of the remaining local matching funds. So have to do the math. What is it? 3.5%? 3.5% comes back to the city. So the city's paying 3.5 cents on the dollar for all of the major improvements, infrastructure on the airport. So as I said, Armstrong's primarily 3 lines of business are airport planning, engineering, and construction period services. And this is a typical process that each project goes through outside of the planning process. But we look at project formulation, we look at your 5-year plan, we look at the master plan, we work with you on your priority and needs, try and rack and stack those with the available funding, program it into the CIP so that each year when projects come out, a task order is prepared for the design services and construction services. And then the process is pretty standard for each step of the way. There's preliminary design, which is survey and geotech primarily, some initial grading, final design, then we take it out to bid. Technically, the city bids it out with our assistance, and then typically awarded to the low bid contract. What a lot of people don't always understand is that at that point, the contractor contracts directly with the city to do the work. So the construction contract is between the city and the contractor, not Armstrong. Armstrong doesn't do any construction. But Armstrong is also contracted with the city as the owner's rep on the project. So we are the eyes and ears of the city who's contracted with the contractor, and we're out there observing and recording and making sure the contractor is building that project in accordance with the plans and specs that we prepared, because the city is essentially paying for that project with grant assistance from the FAA and the state. So the FAA and the state also have some oversight, and we submit reports to them as well. But that's Armstrong's role in the construction process, is the owner's rep on the process. We have no authority to dictate to the contractor how to do their work, safety procedures out there, or means and methods. We actually have no authority. The city is the ones who have the authority. So if we record something that we do not believe is in accordance with the plans and specs that were prepared, or if they don't get passing test results on maybe their asphalt that they're laying down, the city can suspend construction. We can't, although we do serve that role with the city because we're interfacing with the contractor on a daily basis. So we give them a heads up, hey, your testing didn't pass, you're gonna have to do another test section, or this isn't working out, or what do you need to do to meet specs on this? So that's our role on that side of it.
Sorry, could you say that again? My apologies. Hear what you said.
Watch.
You just said, just need to repeat it there.
So Siri asked me to repeat what I said. So those are the fundamental services that we provide. We provide a whole host of other value-added services outside of those main lines. And I'm not going to read all these, but there's a lot of involvement on a lot of miscellaneous things. We have daily interactions with Scott and Stephen on requests and forms that need to be submitted. If any other related development on the airport, we help submit the notices to the FAA that are required. When COVID happened and we started parking, well, you started parking all of those airplanes out there, we had to do a notice to the FAA for every single airplane tail height that was being parked in proximity to the runways. And you can see them all here. Those are all the parking locations that we had to get airspace. We did 180 separate notices to the FAA for all of those parked aircraft, so that you could make about $200,000 a month, I think it is, at the peak for parking airplanes. But this is a relationship that we have. It's ongoing. We typically don't charge like on an hourly basis for this. This is a value-added service that we provide that really helps keeps projects moving forward. And we feel like if we can help you avoid from making a mistake that ends up costing a lot more money and time down the road, it's really value well spent. And if any of these do end up in being like a substantive work effort, then we do a task order and get something going for that service. But since the last master plan was completed in 2012, there's been an extensive number of projects out there. And these are some of those over $32 million in FAA funding. A lot of effort has been spent on maintaining, rehabilitating, and reconstructing your existing infrastructure and maintaining what you have. Your greatest assets out there are those airfield pavements, and the aircraft need to be able to come in and out. Without that 13,000-foot runway, you wouldn't be able to do a lot of the testing that you do, the aircraft and the services that are coming in, the opportunities that that provides. And then all the support services, aircraft rescue, firefighting. So all of these things have been accomplished over the last 10 years, really with that focus out at the airport. And I would say every one of those has gone really well. Here's some more pictures of a lot of those pavement areas that have been rehabilitated and reconstructed, just to give you a perspective and a picture of what has really been done. But while the focus has really been on maintaining the existing infrastructure, there has also been a tremendous vision of making the airport a premier hub for aerospace and aviation development, activity, and businesses. This was prepared as part of the previous master plan, which shows some of the conceptual design and land utilization of the areas around the airport. Heavy industrial related businesses and development on the southeast side, west side with support businesses, transitional, and business park type attributes. So this was a concept that really, as of the last master plan, that really came together, and the city's vision was really not only to maintain what you have, but to develop the airport down this road and really bring the economic development and benefits to the community. So that was followed up with a study, a wide body hangar study, really to help implement and execute that vision. And as part of that study was a look at locations where wide body MRO hangars could go, support facilities, warehousing, all of those types of developments and how that would fit, how it would flow, what the market looked like, what competing airports were out there that had similar services and facilities. And ultimately, at the end of the day, and Mike, you know this from the EDC side, somebody coming in wants to do business. They want to know, okay, where can I build and what's it going to cost me, and can I get started right away? Because when they want to make a decision, they want to move quickly, and we've seen that. So we took that vision, and that turned into this study that we talked about, the functional space analysis we did, and you'll see some of the conceptual plans for the hangars and things like that, and really to get you in a position to go to market these facilities at MRO of the Americas. One of the reasons I share these next set of drawings is we did have a recent request for the study, and I wanted to, we sent you both studies, the draft and the final study, so that I could explain to everyone kind of the difference between those two studies and how we ended up with the final report and what other options that you have. So this was the first concept for a dual bay hangar, 300 by 300 each, for wide body MRO or multiple narrow body accommodations. Also had occupied space. Interesting, if you look at the Ascent facility, phase 1 and phase 2, this is very similar to ultimately what their desire was. So this was the MRO facility, the dual bay wide body concept. This was the warehousing concept, in which the warehouse, the facility could be utilized as a warehouse or converted to narrow body aircraft space, so that wherever it was located, you had the opportunity to meet whatever the demand was and the need at the time. If there was not enough demand for the aviation aircraft parking or maintenance, then you could use it for warehousing or vice versa. So these two concepts were incorporated into a set of plans that included potential locations primarily on the southeast side and some locations on the north side that would accommodate this development. And we started going down this road and had an initial presentation to the advisory commission when the draft came out with these concepts. So you can see the rendering up on the right and the locations on the south. And the feedback that we got from the time is really that was not what the city wanted, or what the city felt like the demand or the need was. And we were told to dial it back. Dial it back to a single bay facility on the north side, that it was going to cost too much to develop the south side. There was no demand for a dual bay hangar. And we were directed to dial that back and look at single bay locations only on the north side. So this is what we provided with the preliminary draft report. So the copy of the preliminary draft has all of these concepts, all the locations, everything. So If now the desire is to go back and pursue the southeast side, dual bay hangars, warehousing potential, go back to the preliminary draft report. The final report only delivered the north side single bay concepts at the time. And that's what we were requested to provide. So you have copies of both reports. So I just wanted to point the differences out. So as you look at those reports, you'll understand why did we get the draft and the final? Well, they're markedly different in terms of content. So with that, the next step was really to go to market. So our marketing team put together these marketing brochures for y'all to take down to MRO in the Americas. It really talked about, the benefits of Roswell, what it has to offer, the facilities, your tremendous runway and airfield infrastructure, and really to try and attract people to come here. And I think these are still useful tools. I think they've been updated a couple times since the initials were put together, but ultimately you did get the Ascent to express interest, and now heading down the road with the Ascent project. So it's with the vision of the airport and the master plan coming up and potential, now the water line is going around the south side, there's some real opportunities to take that vision and make it a reality. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that kind of background and concept, and all those plans are still available. What's going on right now? We have a lot going on. You all have a lot going on. We're in the middle of a lot of projects. So these are some of the ongoing and upcoming projects. This is the list that we have. I'm going to let Mike take a shot at going through each one of these. We have a slide for each one of these. We don't want to drill too much into the weeds on each one, but I think for y'all to have a high-level overview on what the project is, where on the airport it's at, kind of what it looks like, and where we're at in the process. Any questions that y'all have and want to get into more details, obviously we can do that. But as I flip through, Mike, if you want to grab each one of the
All right, this is the terminal airport parking lot. We started this project back with you folks and went through several iterations with the fire department and obviously Lewis and his traffic group and the air center. So this is where we're at. We got a lot of good things happening we're wrapping it up. We got comments back, our second set of comments from Lewis. Those have been completed. We're putting the specifications together now, and we should be ready to bid soon.
Similar to the waterline project, which is multiple phases. This is multiple phases. This is more work than what the available funding was. So area 1 and area 4 are the two areas that are being designed, bid, and constructed as part of this project. Areas 2, 5, the loop road, and the rental car return are future phases.
Okay, Taxiway Alpha Juliet project, we just wrapped that up. We're in the closeout process of that. There were some, again, contractual, the contractor had some issues with his mix design. As you saw, there's multiple, it's close to our record as far as test sections that were required. The FAA specifications are really strict and they had trouble meeting it. So every time we told them it didn't meet, so they go try again. And finally, we got it done. They got it dialed in. They did really good on the end there and got that project completed.
So again, one of the important things, our role in our owner's rep is to make sure the contractor's meeting the plans and specs. The plans and specs were good. There's no issues with the plans and specs. They weren't meeting. And as we went through the process, we even tried to give them some ideas on what we thought the issue might be with their mix design. And we were spot on. They listened to us the first few times, but it turns out that their gravel pits were dirty and the gravel wasn't meeting spec. But eventually they got that, and I think you got a lot of free parking lot paving done out of the project with all their test sections.
Okay, this is the master drainage study. We're about 80% completed with that. We just reviewed it. We had some comments. We're readjusting a few things. We're going to get ready to do another internal review, and it identified a lot of things on the air center as far as the drainage patterns, drainage flows that you experienced a few years ago with the breach that occurred. Those are things that are offsite, obviously, that what the FAA will pay for, again, is what is on site of your airport. we take into account what is offsite as far as the natural drainage flows. So that's what we use to analyze your drainage study, and we come up with recommendations throughout time and what can occur as far as helping the drainage of the air center.
On that.
So
Yeah. Well, did you coordinate that study with the flood commission?
no, so we're still in the draft. We're still in the draft stages.
Because being the flood commissioner, I can tell you that if there's another rain like where that is, if it's anywhere close where that other one, there's a good chance it'll flood again.
Sir, for that,
It raised all those dikes and everything else 4 feet, but that area, there is a way to drain it, but it takes a lot of money. You got to take it all the way to Fish River.
yes, sir. We follow the FAA. There's an national AC advisory circular that we have to follow. Again, the FAA will pay for anything, the study on the airport. Outside of the airport is up to the government entities. The FAA themselves will only allow us to analyze and control the water on the airport. So anything offsite is the FAA is going to say that's up to whatever controls you have. So we will take the data, the natural flows, obviously whatever basins that are affecting the air center, we will use those basins, but we can't analyze anything outside of it. The FAA just will not allow us to do that.
Well, we can certainly coordinate with. the flood
Yeah, but we can
commission.
absolutely give it to you.
My only thing is, if we have another storm like we had last time, make them do it again.
Yeah.
And I know the dam broke and everything else, and there's no way to fix a dam because we can't slow down the water because they won't put in a gate, but that area there is still flood prone. If we had the same kind of rain we had last time.
Yep, and I think the report is looking at some on-site measures to handle the on-site, on-airport flows and retention. But again, as Mike said, we can't go off-site with our planner improvements, but certainly having the flood commission aware of what's going on the airport would be useful for them in making plans for their on-site stuff as best we can. But
Thank you. We touched on this already, but yeah, everything's ready to go. We're just waiting on, like everybody said, Mr. Stark said, just waiting on materials. Nationwide, there's a shortage. If anybody knows the pipe, let me know, or valves. So again, everything's locked and loaded for this and ready to go.
And on this, we were hopeful to have enough funding to do just the blue. And it turns out with the design and the bidding, there was enough funding to do the blue and the green. So phase 1 and phase 4, the tie-in tanks. Now, additional funding is going to be needed to do phases 3 and 4, or 2 and 3. 2 and 3 to continue the water line down to the south side.
But the entire system was, the hydraulic models were built for the entire system. So don't think you have to go back and redesign the red and the yellow. It's all one system. We worked with Lewis to make sure it met all his requirements.
Yeah, so the modeling is done for the entire system. The engineering design will still be needed for phases 2 and 3 when it's time to construct it.
Is that modeling for water and sewer or just water?
Just water.
Just water.
Okay, this is the map, military airport program that you qualify for, and you got a grant. We're actually wrapping up the design and getting ready, the specifications on your map phase 1 project and getting that ready to bid. And that just entails the concrete spalling, some panel repairs, and some minor areas that need work on the concrete. So
Yeah, I want to try and minimize FOD, foreign object damage to aircraft. So cleaning up those spalls and maintaining pavements.
the wind cone relocation, yeah, that was one of the projects that was identified by 139, Part 139 inspector. And your airport is, for those, we'll explain that real quick. You're a Part 139 certificated airport because you have commercial service, scheduled service. So you're held to a little bit stringent more rules than just a general aviation airport that's not 139. During the inspection, it was noted that the airport had a wind cone about 6 inches inside of a no-go zone. So we just had to move it 20 feet. So that was done, and the FAA said they were happy with it now. All right, and of course, everybody knows the Ascent project. David is actually the PE of record for the Ascent hangar project for Armstrong Consultant. So yeah, we designed all the parking lot, all the site civil stuff, the apron, the parking lots, roadways, the drainage. That was us. So as far as the structural end and the vertical, that was one of our subcontractors. So we're excited to get this going, working with the city and get a good project out of it. Scott just mentioned your fiscal year 22. We're in the federal fiscal year 22. This is one of the projects, the preliminary engineering report for 1735. Well, we looked a long time ago, we did 1331, or excuse me, 321. Now we're going to do this runway. So now we're going to analyze this. The payment on it's well over 20 years. And that's what the FAA requires when you reconstruct a project. Therefore, you're going to be well into your 20 years on this asphalt. So it's time for this one to start getting a facelift. So this is the initial project. It's a 3-stage. This is called the Big Rock project in the FAA and the state of New Mexico eyes. So with this project, there's the 3-phase. You go through the PER, 1 year. Second year is the design. Third year is the bidding and construction. So that's how the FAA allows that. That's how the FAA can save up enough money for these type of projects throughout the U.S. So this is the first stage. This is we got the task order. We got the grant ready, so we're ready to go. We get the surveyors out there. We're going to get the geotechnical group out there, and we'll start doing a preliminary engineering study. What that does is tell the FAA we have to provide them with 3 options. We will go and analyze the geotechnical reports. We'll analyze the survey and see what is out of standard right now, and we will try to work on 3 ideas that satisfy the FAA requirements. And that's what we issue in the PER. So the FAA will say we like option 1, 2, or 3. Let's call us. So if they say we like option 2, that's what we're going to do. So that's how we get to these points. That's it.
So that's a summary of all of kind of the ongoing projects. Does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts on any of those projects that Mike ran? Pretty straightforward. A lot of work, a lot of stuff going on. So a couple of the other things that are going on that we're not quite knee deep into, BLM Air Tanker Base is looking at expanding its capabilities and another loading position and doing some of that. So we're looking at that. The city has purchased another RUB building, and we met yesterday and identified a potential site for that. Apparently there's a potential user operator for that. So we'll be moving forward with getting that facility constructed. Airfield lighting has been on the list. Your lighting system is very, very old. Some of the original stuff out there. It's also set very far outside the runway. So at some point, a major project is going to be needed to replace and upgrade the lighting. So it's on the radar, but not quite teed up yet. And then this industrial park master plan, Mike requested kind of some big picture, kind of rough order of magnitude scoping costs, tasks involved. I don't know if you have any updates. I think we were pursuing a grant or something on that. So that might be.
We submitted a grant with Excel Energy, who's doing some projects, and that's what that was for, was to get some preliminary thoughts and costs. So it's been submitted. We're just waiting for you.
So when you take that and you go back to that other vision slide that I had of the industrial park areas and those things, it really, really ties in together really well. So the thing about all this, the one project we didn't discuss on here is the master plan. So that's really part B of our presentation today on the agenda. Yes, sir.
Before you go into that, have you done any studies on what to do for private aviation? Hangars or facilities for
Yes,
aviation?
actually, let me see.
Maybe, I don't want to interrupt where you're going. If you're doing later, then
I'll get to it. It's right down there in the corner. Yes, sir. Yeah. Armstrong's vision and our approach to aviation is we have a passion for aviation. We love aviation. I'm a private pilot, instrument rated myself. Our company has owned airplanes in the past. Several of our employees own airplanes. We're users of the system. Our philosophy is that no sector of aviation should prosper on an airport at the expense of another sector of aviation. You know, a rising tide raises all ships, and each sector of aviation should be able to be developed on an airport to its maximum market potential. If there's a need or a demand, it should have an opportunity to thrive. So when we look at a master plan, we're looking at all those different elements from GA, general aviation, private general aviation, to corporate general aviation, to air tankers, to commercial service, to support systems, to testing, to everything that we can think of that would have an economic benefit or benefit to the community. Flight for life, all of those are important and valuable. So the last master plan was done in 2012. And you can see, ironically, that's kind of what's reflected on the front. You know, corporate aviation, air tankers, MRO and support, and commercial service. I mean, you guys are so well positioned to capitalize on all those markets. So what came out of the last master plan was really a focus on maintaining the existing infrastructure and rehabilitating it and making sure that you're taking care of what you have. And that's primarily where the FAA funding comes in to do that. And there's all of these projects that were identified. At the time, horizontal space launch was a really huge buzzword, and everyone was interested in horizontal space. Now it's electric aircraft. So the previous master plan included maintaining setbacks necessary to accommodate a horizontal launch facility if it ever came to fruition. Again, one of the interim changes, and we'll talk about that, was really that wasn't a direction the city wanted to continue to consider, so that was taken off. But yeah, so all of those things for maintaining existing infrastructure, and then the vision for future development of the airport, as we said, to be that aerospace aviation hub of business. So we talked about how the last master plan was executed and implemented, and you've basically gone through just about everything that was in the master plan that was proposed. You've had a very successful run at implementing your master plan, and it's been 10 years. So at an airport like yours, the FAA likes to update the airport master plan about every 10 years. So now's the perfect timing and opportunity. We're under contract. The grant just came yesterday, so we'll be starting on this right away. These are some of the, and the other thing we'd like to say is that a master plan, a good master plan, is a living, breathing document. It's not something that you take and you just put on the shelf. If you're implementing and executing your master plan, there's going to be modifications and changes throughout the process. It's living and breathing. And we continue to update your airport layout plan as you go. So some of the things is that Southside development area. We reconfigured that a bit. We fine-tuned the general aviation hangar area. And that's these boxes here with a taxiway to accommodate large, medium, and small corporate and private general aviation, giving them their own access, their own facilities, and segregating them away from the larger aircraft. So that's important. We also looked at doing a teardown complex and added that into the master plan and the layout plan to accommodate multiple users in those areas, and expanded aircraft parking areas, which obviously came in handy with the COVID situation. So some of the future project considerations are up here. The sky's the limit. When we get into the master plan process, which we'll talk about in a second, we're going to brainstorm with you everything that you think that you want or need for the airport. And then we'll look at how that can be accomplished if there's legitimate justification and need for it, and then how we put it in the plan and get it in the funding queue. So, you know, like we said about the lighting and some of those things, the 1735 rehab, terminal building, Scott's going to talk about that today. Something needs to be done with the terminal building. We identified that in the last master plan. We did a follow-up feasibility study on the terminal building as what would need to be done to actually accomplish what you need. And I think the funding and the priorities, now it's really rising to the top. So something still needs to be done with the terminal building. And then other things, we talked about hangar development, different things you can do environmentally, solar arrays, different things that fit, economic development, whether it's hotels, businesses, and then obviously that south side development is still really vital. But how do we get there? And what's the outcome? So the two key things that come out of the airport master plan is your airport capital improvement plan, your ACIP. The master plan is a 20-year plan with 3 timing periods. There's the short term, the medium term, and the long term, what I call the 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20. So when you're looking at your short and medium term, that's what your implementation plan is. And then now we'll look at what was on your 10 to 20-year timeframe in the last one, and we'll start moving those up into the short-term timeframe. So your ACIP is key because that's what the FAA uses to program your funds for your projects. The other thing is the airport layout plan drawing set. Every project that you want to do on the airport that's eligible for FAA funding has to be shown and depicted on your airport layout. Otherwise, it's not eligible for federal funding. So we want to make sure that your airport layout plan is updated, that it shows all the projects that you want to do. Now, we do airport layout plan updates after every project is completed. So on an ALP, all the existing pavements, I'm not sure that I have one, no, are shown in gray because that's kind of existing pavement color. And all the future pavements and buildings are shown in a color. We like to use yellow for future pavements, blue for future buildings. So if you construct a new apron, for example, on the airport layout plan, after it's complete, we'll update the ALP and we'll change that from yellow to gray, showing it's gone from future to existing pavement. And we'll constantly keep your ALP updated. But some of those interim changes, like we talked about, an airport layout plan is not like a plat map or a site plan for a development. It's flexible. So you have the opportunity to change it based on demand. So sometimes we'll go in and reconfigure the hangar layout if there's a different kind of market or demand. But those are the two key deliverables that come out of the master plan. And obviously the master plan report that supports and documents all that. So how do we get there? This is the process that the typical master plan process. It's set forth in an FAA advisory circular. It spells out all the different elements and tasks that go. So down the middle are all the elements and the tasks that we go through from right up top, and that's where we're at right now is a scoping and grant coordination. The next thing we'll do is work with you to establish a technical advisory committee, we call it. And it's a group of stakeholders. I suspect it might include some people from the advisory commission, users, tenants, people of the public. It's really up to the city as the airport owner, who all is included on that advisory committee. But it's a steering group. It's a stakeholder committee that typically has relationships with each of those different sectors. So we would prefer to have someone from the GA community, someone from the commercial side, someone from the MRO side, someone from the airport side, someone from the public, probably from the county. But that's up to the city, the consistency of that. And then as we go through the process, we do each step. And then we deliver working papers as each chapter basically is written and prepared. We release those out. The technical advisory committee reviews those, gives us feedback. We make sure we're accomplishing and taking the airport in the direction that you want it to go with some vetting and sensibility provided from our side as to what's realistic. Sometimes small communities get really excited about doing like these major runway extensions. You know, a small rural community might want to go from 5,000 feet and think they're going to get air freight and cargo into their facility and want to do a 10,000 foot runway. And we kind of have to dial them back a little bit and say, hey, you know, unless a market has really shown this support for this, the FAA is not going to buy off on that on your plan. So we dial some reality, but you have a fantastic runway and infrastructure. So we'll be talking a lot about what the opportunities are to develop on the airport. And then we have some public meetings where we'll roll out some different concepts to the public, allow for public input. We like to listen to what the public has to say. Other people, we incorporate that all into a draft report, the draft plans, submit that for review, submit it to the FAA, and then go with the final documents and wrap it up. That process typically takes about 12 to 18 months to go through. Some of it depends on review times by the city, sometimes especially by the FAA. You know, when we submit a working paper to them, sometimes it's not the highest priority on their list to get them to go through. But what we find is with the quality of documents that we submit to them, usually they get pretty good turnarounds because usually their comments are not very extensive, not a lot of rework. So So that really is the process for the airport master plan, and we'll be kicking that off right away. Like Scott said, the grant was just issued, and we'll start working on with the city and y'all on establishing the technical advisory committee steering group. So any questions on the master plan process or deliverables or any part of the master plan? Okay. Well, thank you all so much. That was a lot of information in a short time. And I'm sure he doesn't want to hear it again, so I guess we're good there. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. And thanks, guys.
Scott, you want to introduce Meat Hunt first?
Sure. And next up is Meat and Hunt. We have Jeff Hartz here. He is our air service development consultant, and he'll be talking to you guys about our current air service and where the industry stands today and what opportunities we may have.
You have the presentation.
Should be in there.
Okay.
Should be in mine. Yeah.
Steal the mouse. I'll just take the mouse. Thanks. Maybe. Oh, there we go. Oops.
Oh, you.
Yeah, you have to go back to mine. There you go. And then get presentation and next.
You got it frozen there. There we go.
There we go.
Appreciate it. It's actually been a while. I was actually thinking about it last time I came through. Probably been coming here for 19 years. Back to my Mesa days and working through that, and my American Airlines days, and then working on getting Phoenix here, and now working to, well, frankly, keeping our service we had through COVID. And so things have changed a lot. We're going to start off talking about some industry trends, kind of updating where we're at, because frankly, the airline industry is such a pain in the rear right now for a whole lot of different reasons, which has really affected what's been going on. Good news is, high level, Roswell's doing awesome compared to a lot of smaller markets. Frankly, doing a lot better than a lot of non-hub and small hub markets in the current environment. Talk a little bit more about the Roswell Air Service specifically, what's been kind of going on in there, and then talk about kind of what we've been doing air service wise in recruiting, as well as what we're going to be doing going forward here. So overall, if you look back, domestic passenger changes from 60% second quarter 2020, we've got a 10% down about a year ago, and we're stuck at 10% down. The reason for that is the airlines retired an awful lot of airplanes. Hey, you guys know what you got out here. But because of that, American, United, Delta essentially went out and parked 50 to 100 airplanes, most of them permanently at this point. And because of that, you're kind of stuck. So while the airlines are getting new deliveries, Boeing's got a lot of problems going on. They're not delivering the 737s. They're not delivering the 787s. They're not delivering the 777s. That has capped a lot of capacity at American, Delta, United over the last about year. It's going to last for probably another year or two, stuck right about 10%. We'll get to about 8%, then 6%. So probably about 2 years from now, we'll finally get back to level. The reason for, and you hear about a lot of airlines growing, and we look at kind of what's going on by airline now versus 2019, the airlines that are growing, it's Allegiant, it's Spirit, it's Frontier, new airlines like Breeze Airways, Avalo Airlines. They're all low-cost carriers, but in the grand scheme of things, they're really small. The biggest of them being a Spirit or a JetBlue or a Allegiant, you're about 100 airplanes. And so while they're going to grow like tremendously, an aircraft a month, couple aircrafts a month for the next 10 years, it's going to take a really, really, really long time to get anywhere near the size of an American Airlines at 1,000 airplanes, or a Delta at 900 airplanes, United at 850 airplanes. So it's just going to take a long time for all that low carrier capacity to offset the fact that we lost 300 aircraft worth of mainline, of legacy airline flying. So you look down in the middle there, JetBlue's down a little bit. Again, their only reason is because of pilot issues. And then you got American, Hawaiian, United, Sun Country, Delta, Alaska, everyone down essentially 4 to 10% for this period. Most of it, again, is because aircraft were parked during the pandemic. It's now being exacerbated because of pilot issues that are kind of dragging this on further than they would like. Part of the thing is, especially regionals, there are more regional aircraft that can be flying that could offset some of the other parking of the aircraft. They're just not coming back because of the pilot issues. Fuel is now also rearing its ugly head. So all through the pandemic, we're like, great, demand's terrible. You know, we've got pilot issues, but the one saving grace was fuel was relatively low through about at middle to end of last year. And then we went flying up that. It didn't stop though over the last couple of months. We now hit an all-time record for Jet A fuel, up over $5.10 a gallon. To kind of put in perspective what that means, the CRJ 700s that flying here for American burn about 600 gallons or so an hour. So if you go from $3 a gallon to $5 a gallon, $2 difference over the course of almost 1,000 gallons on a flight to Dallas adds up to, again, a couple of grand extra cost for them. That has really led a lot of the airlines to go, okay, we're going to scale back a little bit, especially in the weaker demand environment in a lot of markets, especially with the pilot piece. We've seen a lot of markets, the Bloomington, Illinoises, the Fargos, the Peorias, the Rochester, Minnesotas, that small hub, really large non-hub markets have got really hit in the last 6 months or so of the pandemic. And we're talking about 40, 50% down in capacity. The good news is we have been able to avoid that. We're not reliant upon a singular entity, a singular company like a John Deere having a big factory like a lot of those guys have that really impacted. We're not reliant upon Fortune 500 businesses developing almost all of our traffic. So we've been able to really absorb a lot of that and grow back into this. Good news is we are essentially directly in line with where the industry overall is, about 10% down from where we were in 2019. Up to this point, with the expectation we'll essentially get to flat here as the summer rebounds into this. So as I mentioned, pilots. So I've been in the industry 19 years now. Every 3 years, literally for 19 years, we go through, hey, we have a pilot shortage. Every single time, everyone would cry wolf. Yes, there was some pilot shortage, but the reality was it was more of a pilot pay problem. Again, when I worked at Mesa, sadly, we even had pilots that literally lived in their cars because they didn't make more than 10 grand a year and they couldn't even afford an apartment or a crash pad with them. It was a pilot pay problem really up until about 2019. Then it really became a pilot shortage problem. The reason for that is American, Delta, United, a little bit Southwest, but especially those three, decided that, hey, we're no longer flying our 100 wide bodies to Europe or Asia anymore. We don't want to pay 55 to 65-year-old pilots $400,000 a year to never fly. So what they did is they tried to buy them out. They tried to force an early retirement or buy them into early retirement. And it worked really, really well. Thousands of pilots decided to take millions of dollars and go sit on their couch, which then created a problem when the economy came back last year and the airlines went, oh God, we have no pilots left. The way they get the pilots is they hire them from the regionals. The problem with that is there was never a building pool of pilots for about 2 years for the regionals. Flight training really ceased to exist during the pandemic, especially the height of it, which meant not only weren't people getting trained in, the CFIs weren't getting the hours to get from the 250 hours to 1,500-hour requirements. So it really kind of had this big snowball effect, which has led us into right now about a 10,000 pilot shortage just in 2022, most of which is frankly in the United States. Ironically, most of the world has excess pilots. You look at Canada, you look at Australia, you look at Europe, most of the world has a ton of excess pilots. We don't. And so the irony is we can't go hire them outside of a few out of Australia. So we're still stuck trying to figure out the pilot problem here. There are a lot of airlines that are trying to find unique pieces. SkyWest is thinking about doing a Part 135 carrier, operating what normally is 9-seat airplanes, but operating under special rules that they can operate 30-seat jets under that same 135 rule, which means they can hire the first officer like the old days at 250 hours commercial instead of 1,500. So they're looking at that. Some other airlines are looking at some solutions. Reality is there is no solutions in the next couple of years unless we flip a switch and they roll back that 1,500-hour rule. It's not going to get better at all for the regional airlines anytime soon. It is getting better though for the low-cost carriers and the legacies at the expense of the regionals, but they've been able to bottom out. So you look at what the legacies, American, Delta, United, Southwest, you look at the low-cost carriers, Allegiance and Breezes and things like that, Spirits, they finally are now starting to tell us that, hey, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We think by the end of the summer, into the fall, things are sort of be normal. We can sort of not keep canceling flights at the last minute, cutting schedules every month. We think we're going to be back to a level set and then grow again down the line. Not that way for the regionals. We're still probably a year out on that bottoming out of that, assuming things continue improving where they hope. So what happened too over the last 20 years or so is we've gone from, again, just like Roswell, a lot of small aircraft, 1900s, 30-seat turboprops flying around, a lot of 50-seat aircraft. We had 45% of the industry departures in America were by 50 seats or less back in 2005. Again, we had 1900s flying around out here. Fast forward to 2010, it's now 38%, 2019, 21%. And today we're down to just 15% of the industry at 50 seats or less. Virtually zero flying is done below 50 seats though. So you got a little bit of 30 seaters out there, again, flying under the 380 rule requirements to get around the pilots. But the reality is the 19 seat to the 37 seat world ceased to exist over the last 15 years. 50 seaters are sort of on that way. We thought that we were going to buy some time prior to the pandemic. SkyWest worked with Bombardier to extend the life of them. And we're now running into the problem that, again, no pilots. So the regionals are looking at it saying, well, I can have a pilot, they fly a 50-seat airplane, or they fly a 76-seat airplane. The 76-seat airplane is a heck of a lot more profitable for me as a SkyWest. And if you're United, you're looking at it going, I carry 50% more people than I did with the 50-seater. So United is down to the last 50 to 75 CRJ 200s. American's down to the last 50 or so CRJ 200s. Delta's down to the last about 30, 35 of them flying out there. There aren't a lot flying in service. If the pilot situation changes, fuel comes down, the good news is it could flip back. You absolutely could get a scenario where they start coming back. If it doesn't, though, 50-seaters are going to be the age of the dinosaur or the 1900s, which is a bit of a problem as we talk about going forward about the United Express type service going to Denver eventually. So when you look at domestic passenger seats, we're essentially back recovered in the terms of 10% off. I'm not going to say it's going to get back to normal anytime in the next year or two, but again, we're going to be between 10 and 5% off for the next year or two as the capacity continues to grow. And frankly, we've essentially hit this brick wall on load factors. We're back to pre-pandemic 90% or so load factors nationwide. So when we look at how the industry is recovering, again, markets like Roswell has kind of been a good example of how this business recovery, the red line there, has changed. So the business market's back to roughly 80 to 90% of overall. It's two diverging worlds. The smaller businesses, the more mom and pop, we'll call it businesses, the non-Fortune 500 businesses, they've recovered and actually in a lot of cases are way the heck above where they were in 2019. Consulting companies and professional companies, non-Fortune 500s are really traveling like they've never done before. The problem is Fortune 500 companies are still not traveling. Microsofts, the banks and insurance companies, they just are not out there, which is affecting big cities and small cities that are really heavily relying upon it. I have one client that's still down about 45%. Same size as Roswell, had a similar amount of service before. They're just stuck because unfortunately, almost all of their businesses are Fortune 500 in town. And so they're just not traveling and they're just stuck at that point. Leisure, though, it's been the shining star of the last year. Again, not really surprising as everyone's trying to get to either Florida or Mexico. So again, the health of the industry, it's been challenging. Good news is, bad news is, it's better than what it was in the doldrums of the kind of 9/11 and 08 timeframe. We're not looking at mass bankruptcies thanks to bailouts. We're not looking at mass mergers that's going to upset the industry. It's kind of a steady as she goes, see how this plays out, see if fuel stays high, see if the demand environment holds. But the reality is it's not a horrible industry right now compared to historically speaking. It's challenged, but we're not facing the death nail of what it was again, 2008 to 2012, which was just terrible for everybody. So with all that great news, we'll talk about Roswell. So again, we've got great service, especially for a market of our size, and we're doing really well compared to a lot of markets of this, again, smaller non-hub world. American reinstituted their third flight to Dallas, or again, virtually every day, third trip a day to Dallas. That's planned to stick all the way through the end of schedule. It's out there all the way through next May of 2023, with the giant caveat that with fuel at $5 a gallon, I would be dumbfounded if we hold 3 trips a day to Dallas through this winter. I expect September will probably drop it down to 2. We'll then go back up in October and then it will absolutely get pulled down for that November through January timeframe if fuel holds high, just because of the fact that almost nobody's going to be making money in that environment, especially once you get to the weaker fall timeframe. Phoenix has been holding at a single trip. We had two prior to the pandemic, or right kind of in the middle of it, came in, came out. We're going to stick at one trip again because of fuel and the fact that Phoenix is just not a dominant hub for American. They just kind of hold on there, but it's not a pivotal hub. It's not Charlotte. It's not Dallas. If you've got Dallas service, you're going to hold typically what you had before the pandemic. Phoenix is just kind of holding on just because it's a hub that is there, but not a great hub for them. So again, expect that at one trip. Good news is on Phoenix, especially with the switch in times to the overnight, it's definitely improved to what it was last year and then even pre-pandemic. So I think, again, good things are hopefully holding there. Capacity trends, again, typically speaking, we are a market that holds mid-70s load factors in the past. Again, we're not going to be a market that's going to be 90, 85% load factors. Smaller markets typically aren't, just because fares tend to be higher, especially those last 5 or 6 seats on the airplane become insanely expensive. So we're really never selling those except on these Sundays and Mondays and Friday type things. So again, load factors typically in the 70s. We've been a really strong market. Again, when I was there at American, it was one of our shining stars at Dallas. I know from continuing talking to them that Roswell is a market they really want to keep and really keep strong because it's held strong. Outside of the doldrums of the pandemic, again, just because of New Mexico's slightly harsher responses, it was definitely a little bit weaker than some markets. But again, bounced back immediately when that kind of got lifted. When we look at RASM performance, so the airlines look at a couple of different ways. You have load factors, the percentage of seats being sold filled on each flight. But the real piece of it is that helps on the comparisons is what's called RASM, revenue per available seat mile. Beautiful part about the industry is all this stuff is public. So we can see what, Hobbs is doing, where people are going, what people are paying, how they do comparatively to other markets. Same thing in Roswell and other markets to Dallas. So here on the scatter chart, you can see Roswell at almost 435 miles to Dallas on the stage length. We have about a 15.6, 15.7 RASM. So again, at the end of the day, we used to be higher than the line. We used to be a little bit closer to the average. This is for the fourth quarter, for last year. Large part of last year was the fact that, again, especially the first half of it, we had a little bit harsher lockdowns than a lot of the Midwest, a lot of the Dallas hub did. So with that being said, the fact that we were where we were at is a strong indication of how strong Roswell is. When we look at this going into this year, as we've seen at least kind of preliminary numbers in the first quarter, going into the second quarter, I expect us to be right back up to at the hub average, if not above the hub average for Dallas. Roswell for Phoenix, again, kind of in the middle of the road for where our peers are. Phoenix is a finicky hub. Again, there's some markets that do great, some markets that are just kind of average. There really aren't, like a Dallas that has dozens of markets that are phenomenal. Phoenix is just kind of more middle of the road. So the good news is, because of that, us being middle of the road is the fact we're literally smack dab with all of our peers. We're not going to be outperforming everybody. We're not going to be underperforming them. We're just right there smack in the middle, which is a good place. Whoops. Lost our. I didn't even touch anything that time. There we go. Right there, smack dab middle. So again, I'm not real concerned right now with Phoenix unless fuel really stays higher or the demand environment changes. Again, that's a big caveat with things, but we are at least smack dab where we should be with our peer markets. So what we do for you guys, it's been a little different because of the pandemic, because a lot of things have changed. Typically, it's airline headquarter meetings. It's going out, sitting down with United, sitting down with SkyWest, American, talking about how the service is doing, what's going on at the airport, what's going on with them, seeing where we can go, making sure that we're front and center, top of mind for them, so we can retain our service. Most important thing is our goal: make sure Americans happy, make sure Dallas and Phoenix do well, and eventually add in additional service. Right now, again, most of you guys are aware, we have that DOT SCASD grant for service to Denver. For better or worse, because of the pandemic, it's gone from 10 or 15 markets having similar to us to 30 or 40 markets having similar to us. So that list for United has gotten longer. We're still on that list. They still love the idea of Roswell. It's just a matter because of the pilots, because of the fuel environment on where we fall into that. So we do a lot of air service data pieces. With one thing, again, that the airline industry is, I certainly wish it was more of a, hey, this feels great, or a gut feeling. I loved using my gut when it's the airlines. And it's really a lot of data. The airlines only really respond to what the raw black and white numbers are showing for the demand from Roswell, where people want to go, what the opportunities are. And so we do a leakage study on a yearly basis, again, how many people are driving down to El Paso, how many people are driving to Albuquerque, how many are flying out of here. Looking at the GPS-based true visitation estimate, that's, again, just quantifying the inbound, tracking people's cell phones that come into the Roswell, Carlsbad, Artesia area, and where they're coming from, regardless if they flew in or if they drove in, they hitchhiked in, however they got here. That's all we care about. But it helps us understand, especially for markets like Denver. Historically speaking, when we looked at Dallas, I remember this very clearly, 14 years ago, was the anecdotal of everybody saying, we always drive to Dallas. And as an airline, I'm sitting there going, yeah, but that doesn't do me any good. I can't bank it on you guys saying everyone drives to Dallas. And one of the reasons why the original MRG for Dallas service was so large is because there was nothing there to be able to sink your teeth into as an airline. There's nothing to trust in it besides everyone's already doing it and everyone's already driving there. Having this data really helps because as we talk to United about Denver service, we have nobody today that flies from Roswell to Phoenix or Dallas to Denver. Not a single, okay, a couple people do because they're crazy, but the vast majority will not drive or fly way out of the way to get to Denver. They won't even drive to Albuquerque to then fly to Denver. They get in their car, they drive the 7-8 hours up to Denver and get there. The problem with that is normal statistics don't have that data. That's where the visitation comes in handy. We've had great success, great conversations with United prior to the pandemic or during the pandemic with this data. And I think that's really going to help us in that discussion with them. We do quarterly performance monitoring, which we'll have a couple pieces here in a second, and do airfare monitoring as well, which is just looking at the fares piloted here comparatively to Albuquerque and El Paso to make sure that we're just in line. So that nothing goes out of whack, because the problem is by the time you realize it's out of whack because people told you or we see it in the past data, we're 6 months off and things have already gotten bad at that point. This way we can see when things happen over a month or two into the future, not looking 3 or 4 months in the past. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of discussion with the airlines, most of them virtual emails, calls over the last couple of years. We're finally hopeful that things are getting back normal, especially for headquarter meetings. Conferences have been going on. We had our conference in March. We had some good meetings with American and Breeze and United. We'll hopefully this fall get back to having in-person meetings, get up to Chicago to meet with United, try to get some lunch or meetings out with Allegiant and Breeze, be able to further those conversations. But again, it's just been the last 2 years. It's not that the airlines didn't want to do it. It's physically that no one worked in their offices. And frankly, in the case of United's case, there wasn't anyone that lived in Chicago. All of them fled Chicago and moved elsewhere in the country because they could work anywhere else. Why live in Chicago if you can live anywhere else? Especially during the winter times. So as I mentioned, good news is routes are doing pretty good, all things considering, with everything going on. Dallas is essentially back to normal. Phoenix, yeah, essentially back to normal as well. All things considered, historically speaking, we don't have that second trip, but historically speaking, we didn't have the second trip. It only came in short periods of time there. Legacy airlines, the regional airlines are really, really struggling. Good news is they've really jacked the pay up. American just announced yet another 50% increase in their wholly owned pay over the last week. So they're starting off at $100,000 a year. So if you have any, kids, grandkids, friends, anything else that, wants to become a pilot, it really has never been a better time to do it. The problem is it's not going to change anything for another couple of years because of the fact that it takes 6 to 8 months to get all your certificates and then a couple of years to get to 1,500 hours. It will help, but it's going to take time on that. Again, because of everything that's going on, United did eliminate a lot of service during the pandemic. American didn't. So they essentially took two opposing decisions. United decided, hey, we're just going to try to keep our core and we'll cut off some of the appendages to save the core. American decided, I'm keeping everything. They only cut about 2 routes that were real, or 2 cities that were really legacy American US Airways markets. They're both back east, New Haven, Connecticut, and Williamsport, Pennsylvania. They kept everything else, which frankly is commendable. It did hurt everywhere else harder than United did because they couldn't keep everything as strong. But that means as United continues growing back, they've got to add in a whole ton of stuff they got rid of before they start adding the new stuff that they want to add. And that's what we fall into. So we're hopeful things will start returning a little bit more to normal next spring. The problem is we don't know if it's next spring for us, or it could be a couple of years down the road as they work through that list, as they grow in. Really depends on how many aircraft and pilots they have for that. So one of the things that I want to talk about, again, as I kind of alluded to Breeze quickly there, one of the things that we really should be looking at, especially right now with how things are evolving, is a bit more concentrated efforts, concentrated conversations with low-cost carriers, the Allegiant carriers, the Allegiants and Breeze essentially. There are other ones that get thrown into that: Spirit, Frontier, Sun Country, Avalo. The reality is, for what we're looking at, Allegiant, because, historically speaking, they like small markets, Vegas, Phoenix, things like that. It fit perfectly for us for Vegas. And Breeze is being the new, it's going to sound bad, but sexy airline. Quite literally, it's David Neeleman who founded JetBlue and others. They've really got the industry excited about what's changing for them. And they operate actually a great size aircraft, 108 seat size aircraft, which is, right smack dab in the middle of where, the regionals are and Allegiant's at, and the low cost carriers at 200 seats. Much easier for us to kind of fill that up. But that's kind of been lampooned with this $5 fuel though. Those aircraft and frankly, any new service has really become challenged because of that. Their risk needing the revenue guarantees or cost abatements, risk abatements in there has gone up. But it's something that we're going to start having some conversations, furthering those conversations this fall with them to find out, again, what that appetite is, what we can do to bring them in and jump that list, to jump the list higher from where we are at Breeze or at Allegiant today by helping them reduce that risk, by helping cost share that. Avalo Airlines, it's one of those that operates a lot bigger aircraft. Again, there's almost 190 seats each one, which 5 months a year, 6 months a year, I'd say, yeah, we could probably do that consistently to Vegas. It's that other 5 or 6 months a year that concerns me, that we can consistently fill 189 seats day, or 2 flights a week, week in, week out through the course of the year. And Allegiant, again, they're kind of smack in the middle. They do have some 150-seat airplanes, but they're growing into bigger ones. They've also really concentrated on much larger cities over the last couple of years, more of the Indianapolis and Pittsburghs than the Roswells or Garden Cities or Grand Island, Nebraska type size. So what we're doing, obviously, the most important thing, we got to keep American happy, do what we can to make sure that their service succeeds here, which frankly, everything we've seen, everything we're seeing right now is very, very good. Things are doing well. That does not mean, though, something could change, not necessarily on our end, but more on Americans' end, just because of the mess that is the pilots, the mess that is the fuel, the mess that is the demand environment. At some point, that could all come, back to a head this fall. I'm hopeful it doesn't impact us much as long as our market stays strong. Continue all of our updating our key data. We'll have a new updated probably in a month from now leakage study that will be for the year ending first quarter of 2022. Essentially, I just wanted to cut off the first quarter of last year. The first quarter of 2021 was pretty bad. And so once we lop that off, it'll be a little bit cleaner to have it just the 4 quarters from second quarter to first quarter of this year. We've got some conferences this fall, which may be something to attend out in Vegas. Typically there's a small one and a big conference. They're actually smashing them together. We have absolutely no idea how that's going to work because it's typically world routes. It's meant for really big markets talking to really big international carriers. And then takeoff has typically been small markets talking to smaller carriers or the traditional legacy carriers. They're combining them into one conference. We have absolutely no idea how this is going to work, but I think it's something that makes sense to go talk to and get there to be able to have some of these conversations besides the headquarter meetings that we'll be trying to do. And again, United SkyWest is still a big priority for us. It's still probably, I'd say, our number one priority after keeping American happy, but we're stuck in a holding pattern. There's not a whole lot we can do on that. And we don't know if it's a holding pattern for another 6 or 7 months or another 27 months. It all comes down to crews and aircraft. And my hope is by next spring, we'll start seeing 4, 5, 10 new cities pop into United, and then it will start trying to fold through. It's just, does everything kind of funnel through the right way? So with that, and I apologize, apparently this thing really hates me on jumping out.
It doesn't like you.
Any questions? Appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. I had one there. How do you think adding a different airline will affect the other service that we have?
So depends on the airline. Depends on the route. A Breeze and or Allegiant honestly probably helps American in some regard because it would add a bigger catchment area. You're going to draw people in from further away. People would never touch American and go, holy cow, there's an airline here that flies to Dallas, Phoenix, because they were buying really cheap tickets to Vegas. United would have an initial impact a little bit, just because there is overlap between what can connect over Dallas and Phoenix versus Denver. My suspicion is, or my experience would be, after about 6 months or a year, it would be net neutral for American, and they'd be fine. There would absolutely be a moderate hit depending on when it happened. You know, we'd go from our mid-70s load factor that may take 5 or 6, 7 points of load factor hit initially as we absorb that extra capacity. It's just the nature of a smaller market. You can't just add in 100 seats without having some impact on that. But I don't foresee.
How many connects through Denver are not served by Dallas or Phoenix?
From our Dallas, I'm trying to remember, it was only in the 5 or 10 people a day each way that we were projecting. Well, there's a lot of cities that have service out of Denver that they don't have out of Dallas or Phoenix. The problem is it's Worland, Wyoming's, it's Missoula, Montana's, which are great places. Problem is we still have a lot of traffic to it. We'll still have majority of our traffic going to Denver and connecting to Seattle or Portland or Chicago or Des Moines, Omaha's, which reality is we can connect over Phoenix and Dallas that way. Those would be better connections over Denver. The other benefit of though it is right now when people are looking, because we're all beholden to some airline, if it's American, if it's Southwest, United, adding United in here would really help for people coming inbound. Because there's still an awful lot of people, I guarantee you, that are coming in for meetings, coming in for business in Mexico, that go, I'm just flying to Albuquerque and driving because I'm beholden to United. And I think that will help and that will offset that initial American drop in backfill.
Yeah, they're all the people who are loyal to their brand, I guess.
Yeah. For better or worse, the airlines have created a system that you got to stay with one airline in order to, keep your bags, keep your seat assignments, all that stuff. It's just, we're beholden to it. For better or worse, I'm that way with America.
But the Allegiant style airports or airlines that would come in here that would really be big for this. I mean, direct flight to Orlando or like you said, Vegas.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would help with I don't know how the Phoenix route would work, but that really goes.
Yeah, my guess is they wouldn't add Phoenix. I mean, essentially what we'd be talking about Allegiant or Breeze or something, it would be Vegas,
Orlando.
Essentially Vegas for the beginning, make sure that works, then eventually potentially Orlando. The problem is Orlando it's a long flight in the current environment. It's a pain with the fuel, but absolutely it'd be Vegas. I mean, we wouldn't even pitch Phoenix because at the end of the day, I don't think we could.
When the Legion, they go into Mesa, which is kind of still a different market.
Yeah, it is a different market, but we find in markets of this size, having both is a challenge. Our market is still very large local Phoenix. I mean, it's still 40, 50% local to Phoenix. We would have a hard time then supporting another 300 people a week going to Phoenix on Allegiant. Whereas Vegas obviously would have minimal impact. We may lose a couple of people a flight over Phoenix connecting.
Right.
But there's very little impact to that. So that's the key is, my goal when we're pitching stuff is we never try to do something that will affect American. Personally, I don't.
But for you, we're going to have to the other, it affects them. I mean, you just.
Yeah, I mean, in a bad way.
You don't want to lose that Phoenix leg.
Yeah.
I'd rather see a Dallas leg get dropped than a Phoenix.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we would do. That's why, again, if we're looking at westbound, we would only be looking at something like a Vegas, not a Phoenix with a Legion, anything else. So I think that would absolutely impact the ability to hold American's Phoenix. I appreciate it.
Phoenix flight is actually pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's especially the last few months, it's really rebounded back to where it needs to be. There's a touch and goes in there during the pandemic, but definitely is back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Scott, take us through the new business, please.
Okay, we'll start with reintroducing the strategic plan. Go to the next slide. I'll start off with a little bit of history. This is not a new subject. I think as most of you know, it's an old subject that probably was around even before me, but one of the history I could dig up, starting with March 2017 action plan, the study that we had commissioned through the EDC. It recommended that we prepare a 5-year strategic plan. That was the first document I could find that did so. Didn't go back to the 98 study because I figured this was far enough because our group was in existence right after this. September of 2019, same thing. Jeff Coleman came in from Aviation Management Consulting Group and made a presentation to us on how their group could facilitate a strategic plan for us. May 20th of 2021, General Murray came in and more or less did the same thing. Next slide, please. So bottom line is that I believe the history shows that it's important to us. It has value. And this was just one little quick thing that I could put up here to talk about why. Number one, it creates one forward-looking focused vision. I think that's one thing that we lack around here. We have a lot of voices. We have a lot of chiefs and sometimes not enough Indians. We have a lot of good ideas. We have a lot of bad ideas. That's where we draw into number two, where that process will help to flush those out, both good and bad. Number three, in the end, it makes us all accountable. It makes this group accountable. It makes me accountable and the city accountable for the ways that we move, that we respond to this strategic plan. So with all of that said, go ahead to the next one. The next step, I believe and I strongly believe that we should have an airport professional group such as Jeff Coleman's group, and there are other options. Mike and I talked to Mead and Hunt a couple of weeks ago, but I would strongly recommend that we go to a professional group to hire them, get a proposal, listen to them, find out what they offer, just like we did with Coleman. And I'm sure that Coleman would be happy to refresh their plan to us as well. But listen to what they've got to say. Pick one of those groups, whichever one looks best to us, and go with it. Stop. We've talked about this for a long time. That was the last thing Amy Cole said on the last meeting she was in here. We've talked about this for 2 years and we haven't moved. So my thoughts are real simple. This process, we go and we get somebody, we pick, we move on it, we take it to city council, we get it moving, award the contract, and we go through the process that they recommend, and we listen to our facilitators. Because quite honestly, like I said, there's a lot of different ideas here, and that's what the facilitators will do, to help us work through those ideas and help us to come out with one direction. So that's my preaching done. Questions?
Commissioners? Yes, ma'am.
Is this budget,
It is not.
and how much do you anticipate it will cost?
The proposal that Coleman made was $100,000. And we don't know yet. I would expect it's around the same number for Coleman to update.
Thank you both.
Sure. Mr. Mayor?
Is this plan for just the airport and its operations, or is this plan for the whole air center complex itself?
It's for the Air Center business. It would be probably the best, but it's a business plan. So the idea, and Mike can probably flesh it out better than me, but the idea is who we are, where we see ourselves going. And honestly, I would see as we got into those meetings with the facilitator that anything's fair game. We talk about it all and we work it all down and let it boil down to what we are and how we want to proceed with goals that we can hit and be held accountable for doing so. Right now, we're doing some of those things, but it's not as organized as it could be if it were in a strategic plan.
Dr. Bell?
Well, I think this would be a good measure to take, and I would support, moving forward, at least to solicit proposals, see what the cost is.
Back to your question, Mr. Mayor, it's really, and Dr. Powell has significant history and experience in strategic plans. So this is really to create the framework for incorporating the vision of the Air Center into a plan with objectives and goals, what have you, so we can not be reactionary.
Yep.
Now the plan can be changed and updated. It often for me, it should be a living document. So
Just be something that would look at some facilities and all the way through education facilities, how much rent, lease, and everything else could be.
you can include all that.
Because it just seemed like when you go in and you went I don't know if Mystics, if they're even going to stay here, but they went from 6,000 or whatever it was to 24,000. it seemed like that almost, you don't hear of anybody anymore, how well, if everything's going okay. Things just seem to be quiet. You don't see, the stuff, the problems that we've had at air sales, everything seems to be quiet over there. But the tensions are still there. There's, I don't know. And then I turn around looking, if you look about the facilities on the base, just going up on the cost, for Sidney Gutierrez School is a big thing after they've added all the other stuff. That's why I wonder how big a scope this all is. Certainly you can't, the condition of the college, what's going on in the college is certainly as vital to me, to the operations that are going on in the airport as much as anything else that's out there. So that's why I just wonder how big a scope this is going to be. Even the way the place looks driving out there is enough to look at to see how that's going to affect people who come in. It's like they don't water the medians or, the cut the grass and all that stuff out there. It's better late than do those.
I suspect Mr. Mayor, I suspect the strategic plan and also facilities plan that will talk to the goals and objectives on where we wanted the airport and the center to be, and the actions that we will suspect that need to be taken to get there. Of course, a lot of the stuff will be budgeted, will have to be formulated into all that as well. But the strategic plan it's just that it's strategic. It gives you the overarching objectives on, frankly, what we want to be when we grow up, right? And how do we get there?
When you go into a place like Hangar 91, I looked at that and those other little hangars out there where the doors wouldn't work, and you go in there and you see all the years of pigeon crud all over the inside of that building. To me, that's clearly a health hazard that should never have gotten to that stage. And but that's all stuff we need to do yet. I think you've got to look at things, whether or not we need another MFO or, somebody else to work on planes, because people that have private airplanes don't fuel here because it's so much cheaper in RTG. Or Hobbs anyways, but, it's just tough to look at it. So whatever you do ought to be some kind of plan that looks at the overall thing to put the place back into a top place, a top-notch place.
Thank you. So Dr. Val, you had
Yeah, I would move to forward that motion about a strategic plan being developed or proposals to be solicited.
I'll second that motion.
okay. And I suspect all in favor.
Aye.
Okay, so moved. Not opposed? No, well, there's only three of us, so nobody opposed. So, yeah, no one opposed. Okay, so
You want to try and set up a presentation for next month? Or do you want to do something different?
how long will it take you to solicit proposals for a strat plan? Because you have to do our.
We have to have a department vehicle of some sort. So it could be somebody who is currently on our, one of our existing contracts, or like what we were doing with Aviation Management Group, that was through the Armstrong contract. They would be sub to them. Sure. And Armstrong wasn't going to do any pass through,
I suspect we probably need to make a presentation to City Council for their concurrence to take that action and begin the process.
That's kind of how I was seeing
Let's see if we can do that next month's City Council.
Okay. For the records, she needs what the actual motion was.
Motion was to solicit proposals for a strategic plan.
So what I'll do then is I'll get Jeff Coleman to give us a current price on the same thing he had proposed before, and maybe refresh that proposal so we have it to look at. So it's one we could compare, and then we'll go back to Mead and Hunt. And I've talked to Chris last week about it, and I can go back and talk to John as well. So whoever we need to with Mead and Hunt, and anybody else we can think of to kind of get comparisons. The one thing that, like I said, that I would really strongly recommend is that it be an aviation professional group, simply because of the difference with airports than other businesses. There'll be some hiccups that might not be found by folks that are great facilitators for these type of plans, but might not understand the airport world as well.
Right. Thank you.
That makes sense.
Okay, airport terminal action plan, Scott.
Okay. Another one that we've kind of, I won't say we had kicked it to the curb or anything for a while, but quite honestly, the bottom line for this thing, as we talked about last month, is where we get funding. But I'll start with this study, which we had commissioned and with Armstrong, and they ran through it with Gensler as a sub on this. Next slide, Lisa. Next. I'm going to go through this really quick. There's about 4 slides or so. So the first thing that they did was they started, just keep going.
Oh.
You can just go real slow. We'll stop there for a second. So I'll start with current inventory, because what they did first was they looked at what we had, looked at our current usage in terms of the terminal, the airline demand, all that sort of thing, looked at like this map where they charted all of the flow. And you'll see as we go through it, that was part of the goal, was to look at that and to improve those things as we go through. Next. And we began inventorying, documenting all that next. I'm not going to read all of this. Looked at the old designs next. And we began with alternatives. So they started talking about the different types of space next. And what, areas that they thought we would need by square footage next, and came up with 3 different designs. Honestly, these are not full designs with engineering drawings and all that, they're concepts. So next slide, option 1, it uses a lot of the existing space that we already have and adds on to expand. This one is also the cheapest one. I don't know if you can read the number down there. It's pretty small. And these numbers will change obviously by now because this was done in 2019. Next.
So it was square footage, 43,000.
Your eyes are better than mine.
That'd be the complete.
Right.
20, basically doubles the size of the terminal.
Right. And that was kind of the goal, is to be around the 50,000. And I believe this one was the smallest and the cheapest, but they're all fairly close.
Which one of those would be the easiest to implement and still maintain operation?
Let me run through all of them and then we'll talk about that. So keep moving. So these were the processes that we went through. Overhead, you kind of see the new flow where it cleans it up. We don't have all those red arrows that all run into the same places. They all go and flow through different places. You'll see that every one of these alternates had that type of setup. Next. There's a artist view of what it would look like into the inside. The other thing to understand too, in this particular one, we don't change the admin area upstairs at all. That saves us some money. And one of the other ones, I think we do. But these are concepts, so we can do as much or as little of these things as we want to. Next slide. Option 2 demolishes both of the wings on the side of the terminal, only keeps the central portion, and basically builds a new terminal around that. Keep going. So you did the same process. We identified, we reduced, we went to simplicity as far as flow and everything was concerned. We look at what the new volume was and the new wings that were added on. Next. And then again, the flow chart of how everything flows through. You can see the 4 gates. That's basically what we're shooting for, is to separate baggage return and have 4 gates on all of these 3 different options. Next. Artist view. This one guts the upstairs, takes all the admin off the top. So we have to build another building for us to live in. So it's beautiful, but in addition to the cost, and you'll see on the end of this, there's going to be a cost of building more admin space. Next. So that one is, again, I can't read, my eyes aren't good enough.
Put admin in the old bank building.
Right.
49,650.
So we're almost at 50 on that one. I was on the first one, the other one, never mind. So this is number 3. And this was the one that, although, I don't know, those of you who were here remember, we really didn't make a motion. I mean, take action on this and make a recommendation, but we sort of settled on option number 3 because it was about the size of what we were looking for. It's in the middle ground as far as the cost was concerned. Went through the same process. Next. and simplifies things, and it keeps everything that's existing. So it only adds on, but this is where I want to talk about the phases and those sort of things. So all of these different alternatives could be phased, and they're different, but since we settled more or less on this one, that's the one I remember, so I'll talk about it. We could phase this in by adding on to the baggage makeup area in the back on the right side. All of the lighter colored stuff is the new stuff. We could add, that could be one phase. The middle part of the T could be one phase. The left part of the T is a phase. The right part of the T is a phase. And I would leave all of that up to our architects to tell us what they thought was best in terms of how we phased this. But we did foresee it happening in 2 to 3 phases. And that way you divide the money up. You don't have as big an impact on your traffic, on your passenger flow while you're using that terminal, while the construction is going on. This particular design leaves room in the middle to set up temporary facilities for the holding area while we're building things. So there's a lot of good options with this one. That's the way we were leaning, but we did not take a vote. Next. There's the look on the inside. Again, this one leaves the admin, and you can kind of see how much cleaner it is on the inside. But this one in particular as well leaves us the option of not touching the central existing building and leaving that exactly the way it is, where the restaurant's there, the door's in the middle. We don't move elevators. We don't tear out restrooms and all those, which this picture does show. I love the way it looks, but it gives us the option to do as much or as little as we want to on there. Next. So there's the 3 together, and you can kind of see what they look like in the comparisons.
I remember we talked about that option 3.
Yep. And that was kind of where we were leaning, but like I said, we didn't take a vote. We didn't take any action.
That's 21 million, option 3.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So next. All right. So that was the short presentation of the old study that we did, which of course is still valid, and we can get anything updated on it that we need to. Where we are now, we're still at that cost and that pricing. How do we come up with funding, those sort of things. So the cost of it right now looks a little different than that. This is what we have in our ICP or CIP plan with FAA, is that it would be about $3 million for phase 1, which is design. That's where we would go through that whole process and decide what we want to do after a recommendation. Phase 2 and 3 are both construction. That could be broken down into phase 2, 3, and 4 if needed. Next.
So,
yep.
Hang on a second. Could you go back, please, one second? So those dollar amounts that you have there, is that from the 2019 study?
No, this is updated as much as we can for now. And I'll kind of get to that when we start talking about more about funding. Going to the next one. Yeah, let me go through this real quick. So the other things also are things we can do. What do we have fully within our power to do, funding to do, so on and so forth, things we've already done. So the baggage makeup room, we've talked about that project before. It is completed, where we took down a wall, basically made one large baggage makeup room out of the space we had in the back, and got the TSA's CT scanner in there. So that job is complete. It's functioning and functioning well. In progress, we're doing some rebranding. This is mostly cosmetic work, but it's going to make a big difference in the way the Air Center looks in the terminal. We're updating the artwork over the cafe service counter and installing a new bar and grill sign over the bar entrance. We also have taken off all of the, I think I mentioned it last month, all of the old orange tile that's on the old elevator shaft. Where for now, we're kind of wanting to use those cubbies that was the elevator shaft doors, those little cubbies in there as display areas and special use type of thing. So we're doing a facelift on that. Basically, we've got the tile off so that it won't come off and fall on people for it beginning to be a safety issue. And then we'll restucco and repaint that and make it look new and fresh. Next. Potential things that we could do ourselves without any grants or those type of things, or continue repainting on the indoor to freshen up the whole lobby floor. I don't have a quote on that, but I expect that's going to be 6 figures to do that. But the idea, I need to get some proposals to see what other ideas there are. the first thing we thought of is basically you get that tile up and you refill with concrete, but I know there are some other options that we can look at that may not be as much as that, but that would be something that would be done in phases as well, so we can continue to operate. Temporary building to expand the passenger holding area, which I mentioned before. We could do that at any time. All of these things obviously need council approval and those type of things, but those are things that are smaller amounts. The removal and replacement of the front awning is probably the largest of them. I don't really have any idea what that costs, but with our relationship with RUB, I think that it might not be too bad. When we start looking at putting that awning all along the passenger drop-off and pickup area, instead of going across those lanes, if you use a RUB structure, I think that would be much cheaper than doing something like we have now.
Yeah.
Landscaping, of course, we're doing a little bit of that now. We intend to do a lot more. That'll be as you go. Next. So where we are now, different funding options. The one thing that we have done is we put in an application for $35 million with the FAA as part of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. It's the airport terminal program. I checked on that yesterday as to where we were. Honestly, the FAA doesn't even know. The airport district office says we haven't heard anything out of Washington. All of those applications are in. They're making their choices, looking at how competitive things are. I couldn't tell you whether we have a good chance or a bad chance for it.
There were $14 billion worth of requests for $1 billion worth of funding.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. The requests are numerous and the funding is much smaller than it needs to be. So that's why I can't really tell you what our chances are. But we should hear about that. They're trying to put a priority on getting those announcements out and back to the sponsors. They told us yesterday that maybe by the end of summer. I mean, they said any day, but realistically, probably by the end of summer.
That is it, any day.
Yeah. So other avenues that we have asked for and not received and probably will continue to, New Mexico Legislative Capital Outlay, that's been on our ICIP list for a couple of years. Bonds, loans, which we would initiate. Property tax, we talked about that briefly last time, but that probably is a long shot if we were going to try and do something like that. GRT, have no idea whether we could do anything like that. And I threw others in there. If any of you guys got ideas of how to fund it, or if you just feel very generous and are ready to write a check.
You can also do a TID. TID, tax increment district, where people that use the facility pay for TID tax.
That's one.
So you create just a tax just for that facility. Judy's work.
Yeah, like rental cars and travel.
Whatever, additional tax, all that tax is self-funded.
Surcharge on tickets.
Well, we're already doing that. We're doing a passenger facility charge at the max 450 the FAA allows us to do. The problem with doing that is that we don't have millions of passengers a year. We have about 60,000. So even though that we've maxed out on per ticket charges, that multiple is not as big as like Denver. I mean, they fund a lot with that. You know,
It's only a couple $100,000 a year.
We can. So,
but it helps.
It does help,
especially if you had a bond or a.
It's there, we do it. Another one that we're looking at that would help fund the terminal is a CFC, a customer facility charge that is not regulated by FAA. Is something we can do. We're looking into developing that policy and implementing that. That's paid through the rental cars. It would be $1 or $2 charge each time someone rents a car. That type of thing. That's another one that's coming with the vehicle parking that Armstrong showed us a while ago. Part of that will be paid parking. In the parking master plan that we have put out, there is the ability to phase in paid parking for the whole parking lot. That's a huge source of revenue for other airports. It's one we're not utilizing.
In your design of these terminals, are these ground level floating ramps, or are they gates, the jetway?
They're ground level. So the reason for that, and honestly, I mean, we subcontracted, Gensler through Armstrong. Those guys, by information I read in 2019, are the #3 rated terminal architect in the country. which is why I really wanted to work with them. They're designing, I forget which one, but at JFK, they're designing a new one right now, Terminal 1, I think it is. But at any rate, huge, great reputation. They know what they're doing. And I came to them with a recommendation of losing the upper floor where the admin is and making that the second floor where the jet bridges would come down from there. And when they started talking about other airports and what they do that are our size, almost nobody does it.
Yeah.
It's all ground loading. And I took it out for brevity, but they had a picture of the Eagle terminal in their Eagle, Colorado, in their presentation that they did. And same thing, it's a ground loading terminal, even up there in all that cold and snow. So it's not something that people mind that much. Honestly, I was kind of thinking probably what you're thinking is that we get jet bridges, we're in the modern world like everybody else. But each jet bridge, just checked last month when I was in Corpus, they were installing 5 new ones on their terminal for $880,000 a piece just for the jet bridge. That doesn't count building modifications, which they didn't need to do because they already have a 2-story terminal. We would have to build that. So it would significantly add cost to our terminal to do that if we were to put 2 or 4 jet bridges in there.
I know some guys that work that sit there,
So
6-figure per and boy all the time, so just keep.
So as an airport guy and a guy who gets on planes every now and then, I'd love to have them, but is it worth it to us is the question. And that was their recommendation that it was not.
It's really nice until they break.
It's good weather most of the time.
You were in Iowa, you were saying that, and, you know, we obviously do a lot of airport design, and most of them are in the Midwest, and every single one has jet bridges, but it's because it's, you know, god awful cold 6 months a year there. So, yeah, you're just like Yuma or something like that, there's absolutely no reason to have a jet bridge.
Phoenix has many terminals.
And there are other ground level loading solutions that we could attach to a ground level terminal at a later time. But, you know, we've got to do ADA and all of those things too. So, but there's other airports that have had that. I got off one in Phoenix, last week. They have a temporary thing set up that went down to ground level.
So if you redo the terminal, what do you project that it'll last until how many years do you have possibly?
So if I'm looking, let's back up to number 3 if we can. Oh, that's good. Well, that's good. You can go back to that one. You can see it. So it's a T shape, right? And our ramp basically is sort of a bent T shape. And we could modify a little if we needed to do that. But the T shape, the nice thing about it is we're not short of ramp. We've got plenty of concrete out there. We can go both directions with the terminal indefinitely. I mean, obviously not a mile. We could expand off of it. But sure. Okay. And even with this size, with the 4 gates that would be around this one, we're talking, we were planning on E-170, 175, 195 type size of aircraft, expecting that's what we're going to see for the foreseeable future. But you could put a 321 or a 737 in there as well.
And that's probably what over 20 years, what you let.
Maybe that may happen. The issue really is not the expandability of the terminal. Like any terminal, you get through the front and you get through the checkpoints. This design has 2 checkpoint lanes rather than 1 with the big CT scanner in the middle. So you're going to move through a lot faster. But that's really, so you don't have a whole lot of backholding area, on the front end. You're not in the public side right now. People sit outside as long as they can. Why? Because they don't want to get in that crowded little room. But other airports, you go through security right away and you get into the holding areas, which are much larger. This is the same concept, that you have all of that space there. So the point is the main terminal building, as long as the traffic flow moves good to drop people off in the front, the flow through into the 2 security screening lanes should move pretty quickly and get people into the passenger holding areas where there's room to sit down, there's air conditioning, it's comfortable, you can watch airplanes take off and land, and there's food. It leaves room for a cafeteria of some sort as well.
Maybe working vending machines.
Something like that. We have a market now. But the big issue 20, 30 years down the road is not the expandability of that concept. It's the real estate on the other side where we park. right? Because as everybody knows right now, we're 120% over our parking spaces, roughly every day. And so that's the need to build more parking and thus having it planned out with new flow, with space for the rental cars to separate all of that, all of those things. So really 20, 30 years down the road, that's what we're running out. So then if you want to stay in the same spot, you're going to look at going vertical with that parking, or you're going to look at another spot. You're going to have some more real estate somewhere else on the airport to build a brand new terminal. And so that's kind of how I see this, and nobody's got a perfect crystal ball, but this is a 20, 25-year solution. And then after that, you start looking at when that next one comes. It may be another 25 years. It may not.
But it'll work good, and you get to that point, start going. And what's my new problem?
I mean, honestly, if we have that problem, that our airport is growing that quickly,
That's a good thing.
Well,
I think we should be giving ourselves a pat on the back.
that's every day. What if my new problem?
Right.
Okay, so you mentioned that option 3 was what was recommended.
Well, it was more, I would say, Matt, you can,
Yeah.
more of a consensus agreement, but we did not vote on it.
Yeah,
Not make a recommendation to council.
well,
So
I think it was the,
let's go down a couple more real quick. I want to make sure I finished everything. I think I did. Next steps. Yep, that's the last one. So that's kind of what we've been talking about. And that really I don't want to go through all of that. I'll let you guys read it, but it's basically the same thing that we do for everything else. First step is what we're doing now. Do we want to go with some version of number 3, or do we like number 2? Or do we want to throw all 3 of them out and start over? What do we want to do?
I'd make a motion to go with number 3.
Let's hear from the group. Thank you.
Well, just to allow discussion, I'd second the motion.
Thank you. So let's open up to the entire room because we have a lot of folks here from around our community. So what are your thoughts on these options? Which one do you like the best?
I think number 3 is very viable because it allows the existing terminal to continue to be utilized during the process. I like that part about it.
Anyone else?
3 looks like the best option from my personal standpoint. It looks like it gives you room to maneuver. It gives you construction out behind the existing terminal. And like he said, it keeps you having the terminal working for your figuring out and stuff.
And if we're looking at phasing, if we took on, say, the new checkpoint lanes as phase number 1 of construction, that could actually be a holding area and leave the checkpoint where it is for now.
Yeah.
And that could be a holding area until we go to the next phase and build that T part of it. So like I said, I'll let the architect do that.
I thought that was
It's not my job.
I thought that was one of the better deals. Kind of got people in and out and away and more spread out.
So we have a motion up for you. Which,
The parking plan looks to me like you're moving everything, we're trying to move everything.
So there was some reserve area right now to the east where we have, and you're partially right.
Okay.
But there is some to the east that we didn't do anything with to leave in reserve. And I don't know if you remember Mr. Bleth talking about it, is he thought about putting a hotel there. Well, that's a possibility, but once you put a hotel there, you've blocked the parking space.
Yeah.
Now that we own the property across the street, that was, that's the other piece, that's a better spot. And then, yes, we're going west in part so that as the need for rental cars expands and that space gets more crowded, we've got more on the east side where the rental cars are to park those cars for our customers.
So it may not be possible, but I've flown in and out several times of Manhattan, Kansas.
It's a beautiful terminal.
And Eden Hunt. We don't need anything that big, but it's an excellent product. So if we could even get something half that size, brand new, that looked even remotely close to how that thing, because no matter what we do, if we put a T under what we've got now, and that looks like it's feasible to understand, the front of that thing hadn't changed. You can jazz it up doing something, but it still looks like 1960s stuff.
And that's one thing that Gensler did that was not in this presentation is the front of it does change and it does get quite a bit of, it's still going to have those buttresses that look like tails on there. I know, and so that would be there, but putting the awning in the front will change the look of that as well. But
it will. But it still looks old.
And that's a major piece of what I want to see too, is I want to see it not look old.
And so we haven't, doesn't look like we've investigated using what we've got for at least 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. And working towards a new facility that may be closer to where all the parking's going. That would serve the purposes better than an expansion of what we've got. It doesn't appear from what everybody said that we're going to be having service to Denver, maybe Las Vegas, anytime soon, maybe in the next 2 or 3 years. So if we can still utilize what we've got without spending a bunch of money on it and work towards something that would be maybe not more like Manhattan, Kansas, but something that would look and operate like that. I can't believe that we're not better off planning that for in the future instead of being reactive to, we got to do something now.
We don't.
Just my thoughts.
We bought some time by now, but COVID bought us some time, to be honest. That's true. But
I'd sure much prefer to be proactive and build a better facility that serves the purpose for 20 to 30 years, maybe 40 years, than being reactive to something like.
What would the cost of a new facility be? Would that be double or triple?
so probably the cost of a facility from the ground would be a similar cost for the building. That's what I've heard. So yeah, is it going to be 35 million? I don't know, probably today's cost, the way things are gone.
So I mean, that's an option because you can build that without disrupting your service while you build it.
We can. The only other issue is right now, everything street infrastructure, water, sewer, fiber, electricity, phone, all those things are set up in the streets and such the way the arrangement is now. If you move over into the grass, it's all in the wrong place. So all of that has to be moved as well, and probably including our current long-term parking.
You're moving it all for the new hangar. You're moving all that infrastructure for the new hangar now.
I'm not sure what you mean. We didn't move anything but old slabs.
Steve, you got a comment?
So here's one of my biggest challenges working in Roswell. I'm going to come at this from a business perspective. You spent 15 minutes talking about how we need a strategic plan and need to see how it works. Now we're being in reactive mode because a strategic plan is a proactive mode. Now we've gone to a reactive mode to go ahead and pick quickly for an air terminal when you don't even have a strategic plan. So now what we're going to have to do is if you recommend to the council and the council passes this, we have to build the strategic plan around what you want to do with this terminal. We're doing it backwards. So what I recommend, because Mr. Kunkel's right, you've got to evaluate everything where it may be cheaper or it may be more cost effective. We got to stop thinking cheaper. We got to think cost effective.
Agree.
It may be more cost effective to build a new terminal, but we got to have the strategic plan and get all the players at the table. Because if you make that recommendation to the council, then it gets to the council, then everybody's going to say, why are you picking this when you don't even know what the air share is going? Number one. Number two is we can't afford anything right now. So we're better off waiting until we have a strategic plan and then come with the plan on address everything. Parking, terminal, hotel space, hangar space. When we do that, then we do less work because I'm telling you what's going to happen is it's going to put the staff doing 6 different plans and then still having to react when nothing works. we've got to stop wearing our staff into the ground. So what I recommend is let's focus on the strategic plan, get our strategic plan together, then let's focus on what we're gonna do with the terminal. Because architecture's changing, technology's changing. You know, we got rug structures, we got other construction projects. So there's nothing wrong with waiting and making sure that we have everything in the strategic plan so that we're not playing reactive. And that strategic plan needs to set the scope for everything that we're doing, not doing this, and then make the strategic plan fit that. Because we'll never get a strategic plan if we keep doing that.
Okay. Anyone else?
So I'm looking at these expansion steps and I looked at what was presented and those were design concepts. Those were architectural drawings, right? So we can't recommend anything to the council at this point because we don't have an architectural cost estimate.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to go through the process to try to bring this to the council, we'd have to take it out for architectural work first. So I think we're quite a ways away from
The action.
Well, the design part's the next step. And so,
I'm saying that would be part of the action plan.
But I'm just saying, as I look at this, it just says determine preferred design concept option. That was based on what we already saw from my perspective. And it says determine funding source. But we have no idea what it's going to cost.
Right.
Until the architectural work is done. And that's
No, we're-
probably 6 months to 8 months out. by the
no, we're
time the
doing
architects get involved.
a rough order of magnitude by square foot price, which was, I think, 424 on there. So
So it's more of just, you know, do we move forward with it or just not discuss it until we have a strategic plan? Let's add it to that. Maybe that's a
No.
better route.
Well, so we have a motion on the floor, right? So you have a motion, your motion was?
To move forward with the action plan to, if we're going to actually work on an action plan, if we're going to table it.
Okay. And you'd second it.
I did.
So what is your pleasure?
Excuse me?
What is your pleasure? Want to move forward on the vote or you want to?
When we table the motion.
Would agree.
Okay, so you're going to rescind your second?
I don't think you want to table it, right?
Postpone
Yes.
On it.
Can rescind your second then?
to something.
Oh, I don't want to,
Amend it? You want to amend it?
Until you have,
no,
Yeah, postpone until we have a
second would just be, we would just postpone action on that.
Okay. So motion to postpone action on it until after we do the strategic plan,
correct. And
right? All agreement?
Mr. Chair, one more question. Who is going to develop criteria to work with the engineering firm to develop the strategic plan? Is that going to come from staff?
A lot of strategic plans that I've been accustomed to and familiar with is, in this case, it'll be more than staff. It will probably be this commission, we'll probably members from city council, will probably be community members. So in a strategic plan, almost like a master plan, right, Dennis? They'll go out to a wider group of people to get the right input to take that plan.
Can they do that post being awarded the contract to develop the plan?
We'll need a scope of services to provide to the engineering firm and consulting firm. To provide you a proposal to do the plan.
Especially if you're getting multiple bids from different service providers.
Need to be the same.
So that was my question. Who's going to put together the kind of criteria that will go in the scope of services to present that to people to bid that? Who's going to put that together?
I was expect that city staff or the airport staff will probably with input from this commission.
And also work with the city purchasing office.
So that would be the next thing. Yeah, it's all of that. That would be, in my mind, the next thing is put together a draft scope of work. Do you guys want to review it? I'm assuming the answer is yes.
yes.
I would like input.
Okay, we would, yeah, because we need to, if we're gonna do what this commission was meant for, or committee, then we need to run it by you guys so that we can have a recommendation from the committee to the council, because this was the whole purpose of the AAC.
Right.
If it should come here, then it gets reviewed and then it gets recommended to council.
So process wise, as I'm seeing this strat plan, we write something up, we bring it next month, we review it, we thumbs up, thumbs down, change it, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we go out for the proposals.
Yes. Okay. Got it. Good.
That's awesome.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Any your thoughts on that before we move on? Thanks. Item number 12. This commission is by city resolution is comprised of a 5-member commission that's appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. As you know, we have 2 vacancies on this commission, and Mr. Mayor has nominated 2 individuals to be on the commission. We've been asked to make a recommendation to city council for their approval of those 2 nominees. Those 2 nominees are Mr. John Hitchcock, right here in this corner, and on this corner is Mr. Bud Kunkel. Commissioners, do you have any comments or thoughts?
Mr. Vice Chair, I'd make a motion that we support the mayor's nomination appointment to the commission.
Do I have a second?
You have a second. I would second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so moved. So congratulations on your upcoming nomination recommendation to city council, Mr. Mayor.
You know, I just like to point out something. When you get these recommendations, they come to you when people apply. You don't even know who the hell they work for. You have no idea when you look about the nomination for the petitions that come out. I mean, it's very difficult to me to see and understand the makeup of the commission now. Very difficult to understand the makeup of the people who are putting on the commission. And, you know, and some of the things in this, I don't know why, I don't know, maybe every committee approves who I recommend to them. I don't know if it's the case, but, you know.
Can we talk about that option? The mother has some history. I think what the mayor's referring to is the form that's on the website that everybody fills out if you're interested in being on a board or commission. Is that what you're referring to? And it was an internal document at the request of the former mayor. And it's not specific to commissions. And I would agree with you, just in my personal opinion, that it needs to be a little more specific as to the needs of, say, of this commission as opposed to the Parks and Rec or something else. So, but it's just a blanket form, and it should be looked at.
I don't know when it comes down to it. Maybe as a farm, I don't know.
I do.
You know, what I'm saying is look at it. There is no information about what's going on. And so, I find that it's kind of frustrating to me that that's where we get. And why it came to this committee to vote, you would wonder.
Well, let's talk about that, please.
I mean, well, that's fine. All I'm saying, the others didn't.
Yes.
And all I'm saying is, I'm not saying I'm new on the block, but this committee was actually appointed before it did any of the other ones, and it's the last one to get done. And I just wondered why. So, I know I've been told everything from that, well, Mr. Hitchcock has a conflict of interest because he owns a 4th interest in a hangar. Oh my God, the rent was nothing. And he's certainly done more than a little bit on behalf of the airport and knows probably more about it than an awful lot of people about the airport, just from what he's done with them getting American Airlines here. And, that's all I'm saying is sometimes I like to have a little knowledge about who's on a committee, what for, why, what for, and when you put somebody into something, you want to know how well they match and they complement the other members of the committee. So this has kind of been kind of a frustrating thing for me because I think the airport is probably one of the most important things that we have put together as far as economics in our community. And it's really kind of frustrating. So, just, so you know, I'm real blunt to the point, so that's just what I am. But thank you.
And in the past, and I didn't quite agree with it, I mean, this commission advises the council. I think the people on this commission should have knowledge of our airport. If they work for tenants out of the airport, it's fine with me because that way they have knowledge of the airport. They have investment in the airport. And if you pull somebody that works on the north side of town and has nothing to do with the airport, it might be a waste of their time. It might be okay to get their advice. But people that have skin in the game, you're not doing anything that's committing the city to anything. You're advising the council. And the council will take what you do under advisement. And it's important to be advised well. And to me, I disagreed with, because at one point, didn't it say that people on the commission could not have investment out of the.
It's in number 6 and.
Significant financial.
Yeah.
Well,
That's lawyer speak. I don't know what
Yeah,
that means.
significant financial. So is that a quarter or is that $500,000? I want to know. I mean, it just depends. It's all relative.
I happen to have a lawyer.
The attorneys have gotten out of hand on this issue. I paid $220 towards a lease. The EDC, who I think very highly of, is going to be receiving a commission for managing. I think there's plenty of conflict, but it's reasonable in the light of supporting the airport. So
and it's advisement anyway. You're not making a decision. If you were making a decision, you might be able to say it's conflict.
It says aviation experience, and being out there, you have aviation experience.
Yes.
I'm a general aviation.
And that's why I'm saying I disagree with that.
We went out to Chaves County, Eddy County, the city of Artesia, the city of Carlsbad, and got financial commitments to support or put together the minimum revenue guarantee that brought American Airlines here. And after we've worked on that, we went and got the Phoenix flight. And we continue to have contact with American Airlines through their government relations team. As late as last April, we met with them.
And that's important, to have connections with airlines.
And so
My background, I'm a certified public accountant. I'm retired now, but I spend a lot of time out at the airport and very invested in it, my gosh, and the future of it.
So that.
Are you a counselor?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a city council.
So I am a tenant. I'm general manager of Kevin Lewis. We do business with the airport, obviously, lease buildings. But I'm mostly joking when I say this, but the advisory council for someone like me is a place for me to keep from attacking you during the city council meeting, right? So I would come and sit in on this and go, here what the plan is, and then I give input, and they would all come to you and lay it out for what, along with whatever I might input. This would benefit to me to streamline someone would make their own volatile in some city council. I have been a couple of times and I haven't done it, but this gives us an outlet to get our at least input in, so you guys can hear it from the advisory.
And that's what I appreciate having an advisory council. I mean, prior to our 5 committees, we had 10 committees and we had an airport committee.
Right.
And I chaired it at one point.
Okay.
When I did, I also made sure we had the meetings at the airport because that's what, to me, it was important. That's where all the information is. If we have a question for Scott or Steve, they can go to their office, pull it out and give it to us. And also it was closer for you to drive over to the airport and get it. I'm not attacking where we're having the meeting, but
It's important enough that I don't mind if we have it out here, or we have it. But certainly I'll work with Mike, consider Matt to some extent. These guys at the airport, just about every day. So we have a lot of conversations that over where we want to go with employees and training and all kinds of things. Don't have anything to city council. But the improvements out there are what's going to break business. Everybody's business.
and I appreciate the advisory council, and I basically was just saying, you have been in the game and the good place for us to.
Yeah, I agree. I think people with skin in the game should be doing these. Yes. Absolutely.
Oh, excellent points, because that's exactly what the resolution says. So, okay, thank you. All right, let's move on. Where are we at?
Sorry.
Who said sorry? Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. Okay. Item 13, future agenda items. Commissioners?
Say follow up on the strategic planning.
Okay.
And then do we know when the city council meets in July?
Second.
Second Thursday, I think it's the 14th, but don't hold me to that. Looking at my calendar. July.
Second, third, tonight.
It's 14th.
14th.
Yep.
Is that going to be at 6 PM as well, Mr. Mayor?
I hope not. I hope we can at least go maybe 10 o'clock in the morning or something.
You're such overachievers, you'll be there till midnight anyway. No matter what time you start, you'll always find things to talk about.
Might already be back in school.
Anything else, commissioners?
I just,
We'll have the election of the chairmanship and of this commission, since we don't have a chairman.
Right now, or which we went to the positions.
We have to wait till they're affirmed by the council before we can make that. Yes, sir.
and just on future commitment, commission items for the agenda, some things that I think we need to find out, have some discussion among the council on. One is in the long term, where are we on snow removal plans? Because we sold all the snow equipment that we got after the first thing. And I don't know why. I've got a 30-year-old blade with the same whole hydraulic hoses on it. But anyway, and the other is the fire department status, where we are on the fire department. You know, I don't think many people know that all the firemen were moved out over to the other, living in a different facility. I guess they were. That's what I've been told. But where the fire station is out there, how it's come along. I would hope that we could get some endorsement from this committee or to look after, so we can come up with a realistic way to try to get that $5 million of funding for the taxiway for the BLM firefighting stuff. If it means putting it in another place, I don't have a problem with that.
No, that's what I was thinking.
As long as we're putting a water line in there, I want to be damn sure that we have one close. We don't have to spend $50,000 or $25,000 putting another.
What about expanding the North Hammerhead on the other side of where it exists now?
Well, again,
I mean, I know it has to go through engineering and blah, blah, blah.
yeah, and again, it kind of goes back to strategic planning. We need to do that to line up our priorities. Figure out what we're doing.
Every time the federal government has a big forest fire in an area, I'm going to tell you, they put so much money out there afterwards. I mean, after Los Alamos fire and the Scott Eagle fire and the one in Ruidoso, the next time we had a fire, every forest guy out there had a brand new Ford truck.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they just put it out there anyway. Given the president, the governor and all that, his staff, and that's probably almost. Then the other is, you know, I would hope that we can look at some kind of place, and maybe it's already here, is for tenant problems and tenant rents and solutions to problems that are out there. When we went out there and saw some of the hanger stuff, the door didn't open, and everything was just, a lot of the stuff there is, 30 years old or 50 years old, and we need to sit down and look somewhere in our planning. We have to look and see about where we are on repairing the ancient infrastructure that we have there now. And coming up with a plan and a way to do it. I don't know what it would be, but everything we had there, when the base left here, nobody touched anything on that place till really in the last 4 or 5 years. And that's just, it's unfortunate, but, that's just the way the government worked when they closed the space.
And that is on our minds to get a good evaluation of all those buildings and whether they're fixable or we slate them for tear down, whatever it is.
And that should all be in our strategic plan and facility master plan.
You can't just look at the airport proper,
That's
because
right.
everything else in the committee, in the community was, all the money was spent to keep up what existing water lines we had, not much less replace anything because of the way they pulled out. So
So a lot of it's still original.
I'm going to do something very rare here.
I drive in and out of the airport, damn near every day. And I'm going to tell you that in the last several months, our watering infields are cutting grass, the appearance of the place. There's certainly an effort being made by you guys as airport management to do that work. And it is looking much better than it did. So there's a tenant out there, I tell you, you're going the right direction. There's a lot of problems, but, getting off the down, get some of that stuff started, it has been good to see.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, also outside the airport, that strip has been all cleaned up all the way down. That was a mess. There's been a lot of effort by the city on that. So.
You can apologize.
So.
Well, I didn't mean to stir anything up.
That's not like.
Okay, we can quit right
It's
there.
not like-
Okay, I want to keep this meeting back on track, gentlemen, please. So commissioners, any other items for next month's meeting? Okay, thank you. Got all that?
I do. I have all that.
All right.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure you were done. So I got everything you wanted. Okay. I know we kind of got off a little bit.
Okay.
One more quick thing, since it came up, is the venue. Do you guys want to stay here? Do you want to go back to the airport? There were 2 reasons we held off. One was because of the mask mandate while that was on.
Why don't we
We
tell,
can do that next time.
once of the entire commission seated, and we have that discussion.
I like that. So I'll put that on there. That's why I'm asking now.
This is a bigger room and it's.
Think about it. You don't have to answer now.
Well, that's true. Okay. All right. Any reports, announcements? Dr. Powell, do you have anything for the group? Is that? No. Scott, any more announcements? Steve?
I'm good, thank you.
Lisa?
No, I'm good.
All right. Public participation. Do we have anyone online yet still?
I'm Jeff Rita.
Okay, hey, Rita, this is time for public participation. Any comments or questions or concerns from anyone in the group?
Yes, I think this was a very interesting meeting. The airport is a gold mine out there. I think we need to expand it. We need to get more companies to come. Once they come, we can have meetings out there. This is an untapped resource. And I'm hoping that with John and Bud added on to this committee, we can utilize that to make Roswell not just a little city in the southeastern part of the state of New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Anyone else?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I thought this was a very productive meeting. It was one of the best meetings I've attended. A lot of things were covered. I'm looking forward to going forward. I would agree with Rita that it's a huge potential for the whole community, the airport I'm talking about. So I'm looking forward to going forward and seeing how things improve and evolve.
You know who he is?
Could you please state your name, please?
Sean Jip.
My name's Sean Jip.
Thank you,
I'm
Sean.
the vice president of the Experimental Aircraft Association.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Sean. Randy?
Yeah,
Hand raised.
I appreciate the meeting, by the way. While we're sitting here, I get a text message from my guys out in the field. And of all things, we're not allowed to run engines today because of a noise complaint.
That's incorrect. That's incorrect, Randy. It's when your staff parked the aircraft towards the BLM and was blowing all the dirt into the BLM. They had to shut the ramp down and sweep it for thawed. I got the pictures right here. This is the problem. I think you're getting incorrect information and you're almost making yourself the bad guy.
Wait just a second, Steve. What I was told was that the tower called my guys and told them they had a complaint from the city for noise.
No, it wasn't for noise. I told them to shut it down because they're blowing stuff into the BLM ramp. You guys aren't parking. We just had to we did $35,000 worth of repairs on the South Hammerhead. We just got those done. Your guys went out there and parked it wrong and blew the signs over again.
Then I want to look at that, but I just got to tell you, the volume of aircraft, and now United Airlines, their rep right now is contacting his upper management to tell them the same thing I just said. Now, if there's more to the story, then I need to make sure I get the United rep squared away too, because he was on the airport.
Here's what I recommend, is when we're training your staff, you need to go out there and have communication with them, because when we interview them, they're telling me that they're not told anything that we tell you and Jordan and Chewy. So if you want to bring this, we're going to bring it. The thing is, it's not six stories. It's about dirt going
I'm
into
just
the
asking,
BLM.
if there's a noise complaint, I mean, my goodness.
This is the problem.
Planes constantly going back into service and, you know, I'm just telling you what, just one more thing.
Maybe you need to continue the dialogue after the meeting. And if there's something that we can do, we're certainly anxious to help you. But I think we have to have good communication between all of us. So there might be some disconnect, it appears.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else? Okay. At this point, what time is it? 4:07. 4:07. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Appreciate your time and your interest in our Air Center. Nothing's perfect in this world, but we appreciate you working towards that. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Somebody let that cup, man.